as Mr. Malaska, and of course the European institutions, which have completely failed in what's supposed to be the European Union's external border.
Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
Well, Morocco, of course, is hosting the next World Cup. I mean, are we suggesting that...
Oh, don't start me on the World Cup. We'll get
the country that's hosting the next World Cup is too unsafe. It's so unsafe.
Oh, great point.
People have to cross continents to come to Europe. And, of course, I have seen personally examples of this. People come from Morocco into Spain, across to the mainland, up France, through the south of France, up to the north of France, where they reach Calais and then eventually come to the UK.
It is a cause for concern, and we are making contact with the Spanish government, the Spanish authorities, to provide support, but also to understand the implications of that situation.
Some of you might remember a poster I put out 10 years ago called Breaking Point, where I showed vast numbers illegally breaking into the European Union. I made the point that if we vote for Brexit, we'll have the power to stop those people coming here. Sadly, the Tories failed us, Labour have failed us. Believe me, unless we get a reform government, those scenes you're seeing in Spain today, many of those young men, lots of them dangerous, will be heading towards Calais and coming to our country too. It is time to wake up. This is a battle for the future of our civilization. I can't put it any more plainly than that.
When you look at what happened to Spain, they don't know what to do. And it's happening again today. They're coming in by the tens of thousands. They're just invading the country. And what that is weak law, bad management, but very liberal law. They passed a couple of laws, and people read. You know, people are smart. They read from other countries, and they swam that 3-mile sweat wall, however they got in, but nobody's seen anything like it. That will look good compared to what's going to happen to the United States. The biggest thing, the worst thing that Biden did is allowing 25 million people into our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning, 3 minutes after 6 o'clock. Welcome, Tuesday, the 11th of August. Collins in for Kyle right here on Talk Breakfast. So much to get into this morning as we deconstruct the nonsense that is the summer news agenda. A confusing picture of unfathomable decisions and events. Groundhog Day just got some booster rockets. And as we mentioned just before the news, let's start by looking at what appears to be the world's busiest rubber dinghy. 230 people crossing the channel yesterday in one boat, a total cost to you, the taxpayer, a possible £25 million. This is no longer a small boat crisis. These boats look like something the Navy might use when going into battle. How bad do the visuals have to get before the Prime Minister actually does something? Your thoughts on that immediately, please. Lines are open. Also, Andy Burnham has vowed to save the high streets that have been dominated by vape shops, bookies and rogue businesses. High streets ain't what they used to be. They were not only places of retail, but sort of community hubs for locals and families to meet up and enjoy a nice, calm afternoon of shopping. But look at them now. How bad is your local high street? And can Andy Burnham save them? But don't get too complacent. The same Prime Minister is not your saviour. We also hear today he'll raise taxes by £25 billion to fund his spending pledges. A sinister warning from the UK's top economist. A socialist Prime Minister raising taxes. Who would have thought it? Apparently pensioners could be in his sights. And the flight that had to be cancelled because a kid wouldn't shut up and put their seatbelt on. They didn't just remove the one family, as you might expect. They actually grounded the entire flight. It's never a comfortable moment when someone goes rogue at 30,000 feet. Bad or bonkers behaviour, please, that you've witnessed in the skies. of all manner of shades and ideas. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. And, of course, you can message 87222. On that first number, Bobby, you can leave a voice note. Want voice notes on weird stuff you've seen folk do on aeroplanes, your high streets, and the matter of a rather big boat. Benedict Spence is with us, political commentator. I don't know if this is a first in the world of Fleet Street, but it's a great way to cover this. The Sun newspaper this morning have got the picture there, not so small boat crisis, and there's a picture of the boat, and they've got a little wording in a little circle that says picture continued on the back, and they've actually put it, it's so big they've put it across the front page and the back page of the newspaper. I mean, this is absolutely huge.
It is. By definition, it is. It's and they're getting bigger all the time.
What's
not really sure that you can call it a small boats crisis anymore.
It's a 49-foot dinghy. Yes. Where do you even get one of those things?
I hear there's lots of those sorts of things impounded from Russian oligarchs, but, you know...
True.
There you go. But, you know, this is the thing, isn't it? That we've been calling it the small boats crisis for so long. It doesn't entirely do justice to the scale of some of these things and the sheer number of people that are coming in the first place.
I mean, it's sort of beyond extraordinary, obviously. We kind of know that. This thing would have somehow been transported. Nobody saw it. And I assume, I don't know the kind of engineering behind a dinghy, but at some point you've got to blow it up. I don't mean, like, explosively. But you've got to have a pump.
Yes.
I would imagine you don't blow that up with your lips, do you?
Maybe if all of them were doing it. I don't know. That seems...
Maybe they all give it a go.
Yeah.
Right. Grab a teat, boys.
Yes.
We're off to Dover. Who knows? But either way, this thing eluded the entirety of the French police. They just didn't see it. It's 50 feet long. And it's got 230 people on it. So they didn't see it being manoeuvred on the beaches in France. They didn't see anybody trying to pump this thing up, and one would assume on a serious point it would have taken sort of almost industrial-type pumps, not the sort of thing you'd buy off the shelf in the camping department at Tesco. So this big thing just wasn't seen. Nobody saw it. I don't know what happened, said the French police officer in a vague French, slight American accent. And off it went. Again, it managed to get into the water. Nobody saw it. Apparently, they fly drones now. Nobody saw it.
Honestly, the whole thing is farcical. And this is... I think we have to sort of think about it in these terms. The fact that it's evaded the French authorities, it's made it the whole way here, it is of the scale that it is. They are mocking the authorities on both sides,
yes.
the people involved in the smuggling of small boat migrants. When they're doing this, I think it is a pretty overt demonstration of what they can get away with. You know, because it would have probably been a lot easier, actually, to have sent all of these people off on multiple smaller boats, as you say, simply for the logistics, if nothing else. So I think one has to look at this, actually, as a degree of mockery, and it shows you just how spineless and toothless and deliberately helpless British authorities are about all of this. We will get the same sort of hand-wringing about smashing the gangs and about all of that nonsense, but they are just laughing at us now. I mean, look, it's literally farcical, this.
There's apparently 20 kids on this boat as well, which is always a little more disturbing in the sense of what could go wrong. There's one fella sitting here. It looks like he's got a pair of Bermuda shorts. It's like he's on his way to Ibiza. I mean, it's...
given the temperatures.
Well, given the temperatures. I mean,
might as well be.
This, you know, they have one leg hanging in the water, essentially. One would assume that's the position for the entire journey. It would have been very calm on the channel. The sun was out, and off they've come. I mean, it literally, look, not to underplay if somebody has, you know, somebody's escaped a war zone, which we're told is exactly what these people are running from. But this looks like a day trip. That somebody's organised, you know, fancy going on the dinghy for €5, and away you go. Of course, it costs a lot more than €5, and it costs us a lot more than €5, because each of those people on a boat, the estimate is it's around about £106,000 a person. That equates to a whopping £25 million.
Yeah.
One boat, 25 million quid, and we've got a cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
So how bad does it have to be before Andy Burnham goes, now, hang on a second, there has to be another way?
Honestly, it's there's, as I said, there's a deliberate helplessness about all of this, which is that you will get the same wringing of hands from the authorities saying, "But what can we do? We can't just send them back because the ECHR and international human rights law and all of these things says that it's not allowed, and they're fleeing war zones, and maybe we don't have relations with the governments that they're fleeing from." But as you say, it's a financial issue, and sooner or later, eventually you cross that threshold. My concern is, though, actually, looking at the state of public debt in this country, looking at the state of the budget, looking at the tax take, actually, I'm increasingly unsure where that point is. You would have thought we would have crossed that some time ago, you know, when our sort of national debt sort of reached Italy levels, or indeed our economic output reached sort of Italy levels. You know, I've been sat there going, this doesn't sound particularly good. But we're well beyond that now, and we're still taking more and more of these people in. And as I say, when the question is raised, where are they supposed to do? What is it that they're going to do here? Is there any route for them ever to go home? The answer is effectively a sort of Gallic shrug and I don't plan on doing anything about it, and I don't know anybody who does. But if you vote for those people, you're a fascist. And that's sort of the response now, and it's truly terrifying how the state has just decided this is fine, and there's no way that you can stop it if it's not. Those are the two existing states of mind.
It's like an episode of Roadrunner, isn't it? Where where the government of the coyote trying to find ever more imaginative ways, apparently, to try and stop this thing. Oh, we've got a one-in, one-out policy. That should do. That should do the job.
We should really paint a tunnel on the cliffs of Dover, shouldn't we? The migrant dinghy just goes into the side. At least it wouldn't cost as much money as this massive exchange of finances with the French. It would probably be much more effective.
Absolutely right. Yes, it just seems we've got another plan, and of course they are. I was listening to one government minister talking yesterday, I think it must have been, saying we've halved the crossings, and of course this is not true. There has been a temporary downturn in the amount of people coming into all of Europe. So this is not just I was trying to think when this minister was. It was the new energy minister, whose name escapes me, the one who replaced Ed Miliband. And she was saying that it proves that 50% down. So our plan is working. And I was listening to this, thinking, I do this for a living every day, and we talk about this disproportionately. We talk about this, and I was trying to work out what plan she's referring to. Is this the Keir Starmer incessantly saying stop the smash the gangs? Is it that? No. Is it the one in, one out, which turned out to be sort of 500 in, none out? That was more. What is this plan that has apparently worked for Labour? What is it? I'm not aware of anything that would have put these people off, going, oh, no, we're not going anymore, because Starmer, as it was then, has got really strict on it, so there's no chance. Nothing changed.
The only plan appears to be trying to drive the economy off a bridge. That way then people might turn around and go, oh, well, it's not quite the paradise that I thought it was.
And it's interesting that Reform are getting a lot of stick about the Navy, and, they're saying we use the Navy, and both, I think the Tories have probably said something similar, I don't know, but certainly Labour are saying, no, it's impossible. You can't use the Navy for that. They're not equipped for that. They don't have the boats for that. And maybe logistically it would be more problematic than Mr Farage is suggesting. However, in the absence of any other, quite literally any other robust or meaningful attempt to stop these things, try the Navy, try something military-based, because at the moment, nothing is working. And when you can have... this is beyond... the bill says here, Benedict, Bill says, mega-dinghy arriving carrying 230 people. In 2018, the average dinghy carried 7 people. A double-decker London bus carries 87. How can the government believe they are on top of this massive problem? It is... this dinghy holds more than the average EasyJet flight. That just gives you some idea. This is essentially bigger than an aeroplane landing in the Channel in terms of amounts of people. How bad would it have to be before Mr Burnham says, no, we've now... maybe we will try the naval thing. Maybe we will try the military. Maybe we'll try something.
Genuinely, I don't think that there is a point at which most Labour MPs would consider this a problem. I think we really need to remember that an awful lot of them exist in two worlds. One where they think that immigration, migration, multiculturalism, whatever you would call it, is good, and that we need more of it because fundamentally they don't like Britain. They don't like it as it is. They want to change it. And B, that there are those people who believe that all of these people are migrants and, are refugees and fleeing war, and that we have a moral responsibility to these people.
Yes.
There is no way you can convince those people. If that's their worldview, you will never convince them otherwise.
Yes.
That this is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. And it's also underpinned by legal migration. Because people who come into this country legally, which, again, the numbers, the average member of the public does not realise how high that number is. Those people, they come here, they settle, after a while they get the right to vote. Pretty quickly, in fact, they get the right to vote. Pretty quickly they become citizens. Then they have children, then their children have children. And all of those people vote for parties, well, I say all of them, a lot of those people vote for more immigration, because what those people want is for their newly adopted country to look more like their old adopted country. That's not, as I said, it's not the case for all communities. There are some communities that are very well integrated and actually come to Britain because they wish to be British rather than simply look at the economic prospects and then try and make it a slightly more upmarket version of the place that they've just left. But those people, they get to large enough numbers and they vote Labour by and large because, first and foremost, they think Labour is the party that's going to continue with the migration. But also, secondly, because a lot of these people come from countries where actually the thing you do if you're going to get involved in politics is you cling to the most powerful party in the place that you happen to live in. In parts of the Midlands and the north of England, that has always been Labour, which is why you get lots and lots of people who socially do not have left-wing views at all. Their attitudes towards homosexuals and women and all of these sorts of things, they are not left-wing at all. But they join the Labour Party because they go, those are the guys that win, they're in power, that's what we need to be part of. And then once they're in, you're never going to get them out, and then you're never going to get Labour to deviate from that position.
I've told this story before, but just it shows you sort of what we're up against with this. I went to a house party in Sevenoaks, and I say a house party, it rather sounds like, I don't know, Fatboy Slim is scratching some tunes in the corner. It was nothing like that. It was sort of 7 or 8, houses were invited to this thing, and it was quite nice. But I did. Sevenoaks is always thought of as a typical kind of Tory Parklands place. It does have a Conservative MP, and it's always had a Conservative MP, but it's very Lib Dem. It's very, very Lib Dem. Whenever there's an election, you always see a proliferation of Lib Dem signage, the big ones on there. So you've got these £4 million houses and a massive vote Lib Dem sign, which I always find quite mysterious, but that's a separate point. So I was at this thing, and my Lib Dem had gone off early doors. I spotted this woman in the corner, and I thought, I know I have to avoid her. But in the end, naturally, as the chessboard of a Sevenoaks powwow started to move around, I found myself in a sort of checkmate situation with the Lib Dem. And she said, "Oh, hello, what do you do?" And we were chatting away, and she said, "Oh, so what sort of things do you talk about?" And I said, "Well, obviously, channel migration is the big one." And that was the point where her eyes sort of, I think they watered a little bit, and she sort of took a breath, and she looked at me and she stared down, and she was clearly considering how she should articulate her trauma. And she said, "I know, what are we going to do with these poor people?" And I thought, it's not Ethiopia in the 80s, love. It's not like, this is not a Bob Geldof moment. That was her takeaway from this. She wasn't being mischievous. She wasn't trying to be in any way argumentative. That was literally her heartfelt assessment of the channel. What are we going to do? These poor people, they've escaped a war zone. What do we do? And I knew there was no point in getting into any further conversation with her. So. But that is the takeaway, and that's what we're dealing with the Labour government. You listen to some of these, the backbench MPs you rarely hear from. Once in a while they appear on a show somewhere. That's exactly what they would say.
Yeah, far too many, we have to also say, far too many people in this country have this attitude. I wonder, is it a generational thing? Is it a class thing? Is it sort of an economic background, part of the country that you live in kind of thing? But there are people who refuse actually to understand, refuse to engage in what the problem is, because, as you say, they believe fundamentally that everybody who comes here is a legitimate refugee, that they're all fleeing war zones, that they're all perfectly honest, and also that there's no solution other than to just take them in and pay for them. The idea that at some point you would ever send a refugee back presumably because the war ends in that country,
Yes.
is absolutely, they will not consider it at all. Yeah, but that is in fact the point of a refugee. It's a temporary thing. So now that the war in Syria, for instance, is over, ostensibly over, if you were to turn around and say, right, well, these Syrians, they will be going back, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. You couldn't
Yes.
possibly send them back to that dreadful, ghastly place. But if you try and say that Syrian culture is dreadful and ghastly, or that the country is dreadful and ghastly, well, you are a racist and a bigot. So, it's always that sort of tricky thing where the places that they come from, the cultures that spawn the conflicts maybe that start them, or the persecution, they are both dreadful and barbaric, and at the same time, don't you dare for a second suggest that they are dreadful and barbaric, because everything is equally valuable.
Yeah, spot on. What I should have said to Lottie, of course she was called Lottie, at the party, was I did notice, Lottie, that the house just 2 down from you is to let. So why not invite, I don't know, half a dozen of these young 23-year-old guys to live next door to you? And I honestly, this is where it's exposed, isn't it? Because I think she would be... she's got 4 daughters, by the way. I think she would be slightly perturbed if that were the case.
Do you know what I would say is that at some point one thinks, well, maybe if we get enough migrants dropped around the country into these sort of leafy, nice areas, maybe then the attitudes will change. But how many years did we put up with the grooming gang scandal? Now, all across the country, the industrialised abuse of people, and it was ignored, swept under the carpet, told that it was a dog whistle. Labour MPs said that it was a dog whistle. It wasn't true. Given that the tolerance that many in the middle class actually have for the issue of multiculturalism and migration, would they say anything? Would they actually pipe up in the numbers that would be needed to shift the dial? Actually, I think part of the problem that we have is weaponising both British empathy and tolerance and politeness. All of these things basically coagulate into not saying anything, just going about your day, keeping your head down. Because actually, why are you going to be the one that's going to stick your head above the parapet and risk being called a racist, given that this society has decided being called a racist is the worst crime you can possibly commit? Correct. Worse, in fact, than murder. If you are simply somebody who carries any prejudice in your heart, you need to be cast out of society. So none of those people are going to be the ones to break cover first, because their entire worldview is set up around basically saying, those working class people down there, they're horrible racists and we're not like them.
Absolutely. And can I just say, should there perchance be anyone from the Hope Not Hate fan club listening to this, you would apply exactly the same. I would apply that same analogy to Lottie. If half a dozen, 6, 8, 23-year-old local white boys were about to move into the house next door, I would suggest the same potential of carnage, uproar and disturbance would take place.
This is the irony, isn't it? That the same people who insist that all of these people are not in fact men, but women and children, and that the ones that are men are all fleeing war zones, they would be the first people to talk about the danger of white male rage and violence and misogyny and incels, as if this is a phenomenon that only applies to white people. They would absolutely be the first ones to talk about the epidemic of violence against women and how much of that is caused by white people. And this, of course, is all very ironic, because the big boogeyman when it comes to the issue of the incels and the violent young men is Andrew Tate. And Andrew Tate is sort of held up as this awful example of humanity and how, oh, he's coming for your kids, he's going to radicalise them. But he doesn't actually appeal to white middle-class kids, or indeed to many white working-class kids. He never has. The great elephant in that room is he directly appeals to ethnic minority children. He really plays on those sort of cultural aspects that apply much more to especially young black boys in particular, because of course that is his background. He knows what his audience is. It's very interesting how he focuses in on certain cultural aspects that apply to certain ethnic groups and not to others. But to white middle England, he's coming for your white kids, and he's what's turning them into white devils, basically.
Interesting.
Which is where you get the whole adolescence thing, and the changing of the character in adolescence from a black boy to a white boy, because this is in fact the great moral outrage and the great moral danger. But if you actually look at who it is that these people target, it's a bit like Islamic extremists, for instance. They don't go around targeting young white middle-class boys because, what have they got in common? They go after young Pakistani boys or young Arab boys or, you know, people like that. And it's the same sort of thing. They don't go after those kind of boys. But you would absolutely think that that is the demographic that is the major problem in this country. If you listen to those sorts of people, like the one that you interacted with at your party.
Yeah. Lottie, morning if you're listening, by the way. I did promise I'd play you a record. She said, can you play something nice if I listen to you? It's like, I'm not even going to bother with this conversation any longer. This in from Keith in Nottingham says, morning Ian and Benedict. So we have 230 illegal migrants on one boat. Just how many vape shops, car washes and Turkish barbers does one country? We're going to talk about the high street in just a second. We'll also go from the seas to the skies in terms of that story of the child that grounded an entire aeroplane because they wouldn't shut up, sit down and put their seatbelt on. The captain didn't just say, can we remove this family, please? They stopped the entire flight. This was in Canada. Extraordinary things you've seen at 30,000 feet. Please, 0344 499 1000. More coming up with Benedict next, right here on Talk. Do Reform, however, have a plan to build more prisons?
Yeah, 100%. So we will have overseas prisons. We will deport all foreign prisoners to their point of origin. You know, like Labour has done with some, by the way. Do you remember that one of them one of an illegal migrant from Ethiopia, they sent him back straight away.
Yeah.
You know, there was no returns agreement or they had no problem with that.
Why can't that just happen?
Why can't that just happen now? So that's one thing we do. So we free up about 12,000 spaces just doing that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Let's talk a little bit about the high street here, Benedict, because Andy Burnham, because he's a normal bloke who likes white bread and pork scratchings, he's on our side when it comes to the battle of the high street, and he's going to get tough, apparently, on high streets that have way too many vape shops, bookmakers and what he calls rogue businesses, and this will be about changing planning laws. So I've long wondered how it could be, just to go back to Sevenoaks again, you know, a new barber shop opened not that long ago.
Yeah.
And I always thought that when you apply and say, like, oh, you know, I've got a new business and I want to open up here and we're a barber shop, there's something in the planning meeting will go, well, we don't need another barber shop. Somebody would just literally say, in fact, the barber shop that opened next door but one to a barber shop. And just over the road is a barber shop. And just down the road are 20 barber shops. So you might think it would just be logistics. It would just be common sense. Well, we don't need a barber shop. But apparently they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to say, you can't open a barber shop.
Well, I imagine that's because actually there's such a paucity of businesses that are trying to open in many parts of the country.
Yes.
And the one thing that these barber shops do have is money. The reason that they have money is because they're largely a money laundering front for organised crime. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that they are. And the big giveaway is that they are specifically Turkish barber shops.
Yep.
Who are the people that actually run a lot of the people trafficking rings into this country? They're Kurds. They're Kurdish gangs. And, you know, some of them don't even hide that fact. They'll say Kurdish barbershop, not even Turkish barbershop. You kind of sit there and go, right, OK, this is your big contribution to society, isn't it? No, it's not. We all know what's going on there. They've got the money to actually open up in the first place because it's ill-gotten gains. I'm sure there are some legitimate Turkish barber shops in the UK. Before anybody gets upset, I'm not saying that they are all money laundering fronts.
Of course.
But an awful lot of them are. A bit like those American candy shops that you see in... anybody who doesn't live in London, this is the latest blight that we have, which is that every third shop is a shop selling American-style sweets.
Yes.
That nobody is ever in these shops is the key thing.
Nobody's ever in. And just to your business rates, some of these shops are like in Oxford Street, and you think the business rates are about 100 grand a month in these places. I'm exaggerating the point, but it's huge.
Yeah.
So who decides they're going to go for a prime piece of real estate to sell some Haribos? I mean, it's just that you wouldn't get that through Dragon's Den, would you?
No.
I mean, Peter Jones would be incandescent with your stupidity. Not really? What, you're going to sell those licorice shoelace things?
And yet somehow here we are. We've got this is, as I said, and yeah, the vape ones is another example of this. It's the same sort of basic thing. And this is a sign, frankly, of the state of affairs that Britain has got itself into, where the gains, the ill-gotten gains of organised crime are literally on show for everybody to see, both in the terms of the people who are coming across the channel, which you can see every day, and then you can see them operating in cities like London, like Manchester, like Leeds. Where? Well, they're several things. They're taxi drivers and they're delivery drivers. And this, of course, is the big thing. You see all of these people rushing around on mopeds around all of these cities with L plates on them, because you don't need to have passed your test. You simply need to have bought a provisional licence and to be learning, and then you can operate it. You can operate it as if you're running a business. That's what they do. And that's why, you know, frankly, if you want to avoid things like, you know, funding organised crime, you shouldn't use things like Uber Eats and Deliveroo, because a lot of the drivers are here illegally. That's how they operate, and that's how they then start earning the money to pay the people smugglers back. And the whole thing, as I say, is a racket, and it's the same thing with these barbershops, but this is where the money is in a lot of places. This is where liquid cash is that needs to be cleaned up pretty quickly.
Shouldn't there be a thing on your provisional licence? You know, when you look at a licence and there's a sort of a list of things you can and cannot ride or drive, should it not say can't deliver pizzas or something like that on your provisional licence?
I mean, it would be interesting.
Because that would suggest you are working, and if you are working, you would ordinarily, like a taxi driver, if you're a taxi driver, your insurance is more because you are doing something that involves a little more than a leisurely ride or drive.
Well, of course, the issue is it involves a little bit more than just pizzas or curry as well. Because what else would you quite like to be able to deliver door to door that maybe a criminal enterprise would provide?
What are you unveiling here for?
I don't know.
Are you suggesting there could be some iffy goods as
Entirely
well?
possible.
As well as a 12-inch pepperoni?
Yeah, that's not just American candy either. And I'm not talking about mobile hair cutting services either. There are other things that one can get delivered to your door these days that perhaps having people working in a large network of delivery drivers would greatly appreciate. But, you know, that's just part and parcel. Because, let me just say, they don't just make their money entirely through smuggling people across the channel. They make their money through smuggling other things as well. The prices of which, in some cases, are down, depending on what good it is it may be that you're seeking. But as I say, it's a very visual sign of the manner in which so many criminal enterprises are able to operate with relative impunity. They're doing it pretty brazenly out in the open, and our own rules allow them to do it. And the point is, and this goes back to what I was saying at the start, it's a deliberate state of helplessness. Authorities will sit there and go, well, what are we supposed to do? We can't discriminate against them. They appear to be legitimate businessmen. And we have no reason to suspect that they may not be. And you just kind of think, come on, any sensible country would look at the people, look at the names of the people, and say, I wonder what's going on here. Maybe this warrants a little bit more investigation, and maybe we shouldn't say yes to letting them open yet another business on our high street.
I do find the vape shop one slightly mysterious, bearing in mind, I don't know how much effort has gone in over the last 20, 30 years to stop people smoking. In all sorts of areas, you can't. Tobacco advertising in sport was banned completely. You can't show anybody on the TV, even in a soap opera these days, having a crafty cigarette. I was looking at a clip. What was it? A clip of a film where a character was having a cigarette. And it wasn't relevant to the character, really. So it wasn't as if it was a boozing, chain smoking, kind of rough lad. So it would have been some relevance. It was just somebody casually smoking on a sofa watching the TV. There was no reference to it. That wouldn't happen. So they've gone hell for leather in stopping the image of smoking and all that it entails, and yet simultaneously allowed 1 trillion vape shops to open. I know it's not the same thing quite, although it's still very untested in the area of whether these things are good. So on that basis alone, I find that a bit strange. And of course, for some kids, it will be a gateway to having a cigarette. People argue that point, but you see what I'm saying. It's a bit of all the things you might see a proliferation of. What essentially are smoking shops, albeit of a different kind, is a bit weird.
It is a bit weird. It's, you know, slightly less bad for you, but we're not entirely sure how much less bad, and we're not sure if there are other side effects that may in fact be worse. Environmentally, it's not very good. These things all appear to be made of plastic, you know, none of which are recyclable. So you would have thought the eco-lobby would have been furious about this. A part of me, though, just wonders if the whole thing from the start was always just about smashing tobacco companies. It wasn't just about people's health or anything like that, but it was simply an aspect of society that felt that tobacco companies were evil, in the same way that there are people who will believe that oil companies or whatever else it might be are evil no matter what. And won't do. Amazon being another example. Amazon is evil to a certain subset of the population. It doesn't matter how much easier it makes life for the majority of people, how much more convenient, how much more it improves society as a result. It is fundamentally evil, and they'd like to smash it. And if that means going back 30 years, but there are lots of people who are actually completely fine with that. And the problem is, a lot of these people are very motivated, and they end up working in quangos or NGOs or whatever it is, who then lobby the government, and that's how policy ultimately gets made.
It is interesting, isn't it? The same people that were telling everyone, how dare you smoke, are probably quite behind. You know, look, he's opened a new vape shop. Isn't that fantastic?
I'd happily bring back cigarettes, it must be said. I think vapes smell no better than the weird artificial fruit flavours that you smell as you walk down the street, and you think, is tobacco really that much worse than whatever the hell this is? I don't think so. Part of me wonders if actually smoking might end up making a sort of a weird countercultural comeback, or at least it would if people had the money to do it. But simply because, if nothing else, you look like a bit of a tit when you're smoking a vape. I'm sorry, you do.
Some of them are the size of a canoe, aren't they? I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
And they've got flashing lights and bubbles, and you think, oh, wow, what next? Racing stripes? You know, it's very, very odd.
What's going on?
Whereas if there's something...
What have you got? I've got a 2 litre here.
I don't smoke, but there is something strangely dignified about a small, very simple cigarette compared to this great big contraption.
But the taboo around smoking has got so much worse. There's a sort of apocryphal story of some worthy animal rights protester who broke into a laboratory and stole a beagle, as you do, and then had to get rid of it because she realised it smoked 40 a day. And you should have seen the lipstick in what. All of that, just that, it crystallises that that sort of anti-smoking thing, which has got worse the more it's banned.
Yeah, although at some point it will have gone so much out of fashion, so to speak, that therefore it may make the comeback, because actually to the average person they won't think of it in those terms. They won't look at it and think of it in the same way that a generation of people had it hammered into them. It will be alien to them because they never had that experience, and actually they won't end up seeing lots of people you know, with the yellow teeth and fingers and all that sort of thing, and the emphysema. They won't see the slightly grubby side of it, the way that it was portrayed as actually being quite a disgusting habit, which, to be fair, I tend to think that it was not a great habit to have. But I think that will have disappeared at a certain point, at which point I then wouldn't be surprised if, in a slightly retro way, it makes a comeback. I was going to say a bit like vinyl, but obviously vinyl doesn't kill people. But, you know, so that sort of thing.
It depends what you're listening to.
Yes. Fair enough. There
is that. I've always maintained that the occasional Marlboro Light is part of your 5 a day. Just for the Ofcom fans, there you go. Alan in Middlesbrough says, leafy Lib Dem areas, I love this, leafy Lib Dem areas, funnily enough, correlate with majority white British areas with fantastic high streets. These people live knowingly in a bubble and would never consider going to Luton Central for their provisions and lattes. Great point.
Yes, that's true. Have you been to Luton Central before?
I'm familiar with it.
Yes. All of us have had to go through it.
Yeah.
If nothing else, to get to the airport when we've got a particularly cheap flight to catch somewhere else. But yeah, that's a story for another time. But this is true, is the thing. It is people who are removed from the realities of this, and this has always been the case. And it's been a way of people who will never be negatively impacted by this, being able to say, look at what a good person I am, to their friends, whilst never having to deal with the consequences. The question is, though, as we said, at what point, when it does start to impact them, would opinions begin to change? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Woo Woo says, first thing I want to know, Ian, did you get your hair done at the local Turkish barber? Actually, my barber is Jordanian, and we have this conversation about the iffy barbers. He's got very varying views on it. I did once go inadvertently to what transpired to be, I think it's not there anymore. Some of these things last about 6 months, and then they open up down the road with the same blokes in them. But I think that was a sort of an iffy barber's outfit, which I would... The guy that picks up the clippers, you know, the clippers they use, those things, picked it, somebody handed them to him, and he looked at them like it was the first time he'd ever held them, and I thought, he's about to cut my hair, this fella. He was examining it, thinking, right, there's the on switch. Where do I go from here? I'll just give it a go, which is why I never went there again. Your high street stories of a nightmare, please. What has gone wrong? How bad is it? What are the disproportionate shops that are represented in your local high street? How dull? I mean, high streets were, as a kid, I didn't like going to a high street with my mum because she'd always bump into people and you'd spend 20 minutes talking to different characters she met along the way, and then she'd say goodbye and you'd walk 10 feet down the road and she'd bump into somebody else. So that annoyed me, but there was also simultaneously something exciting about going into town. Where you go, we're going into town today. And that's how it was kind of phrased, and off you went, and it was sort of exciting, this amazing amount of shops, and now it's sort of all gone. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about perils in the skies in just a couple of moments. Lines are open. You can voice note us on that number as well. Message 87222 on the point of voice notes. Let's get one on the big boats. This comes from Henry. Morning, Henry.
Good morning, Ian. My solution to the migrant crisis is not to have detention centres scattered around the country. Build a floating detention centre on pontoons 3 or 4 miles offshore, off the east coast, just near where all those lovely wind turbines are. Basically just pontoons in the shallow water by the wind turbines. Wouldn't be particularly lovely, but it would be humane, it would be safe, and it would be a deterrent, and it would be British territory. So, fairly straightforward solution, I would have thought. Great show.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 22/7. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. It's Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carl for the rest of this week. Benedict Spence is still with us. I was intrigued by this story, Benedict, of a flight that was cancelled in Canada after a kid refused to wear a seatbelt. And, of course, it's reignited the debate about etiquette and safety procedures relating to travellers. This was called Porter Airlines, so one would assume it's a domestic airline in Canada, which was preparing to depart from Victoria to Toronto. this was just a few days ago, returned to the terminal because the young kid was standing on their seat and would not secure their seatbelt. The delay meant the flight could not depart before the runway closed after midnight, so passengers had to be rebooked onto a flight the following day. You would be incandescent if you're waiting on a flight. I mean, the whole procedure of flying is an ache to me, particularly that waiting on the, you're all on the plane and you think we've all been on it for 45 minutes, hasn't gone anywhere yet, hasn't even done that slow reversal thing. So it's a pain on a good day. Yeah. When you've got some kid kicking off and refusing to put their seatbelt on. Now, I've got a bit of a sympathy here because, maybe there was something wrong and the kid was panicked and the parent had done their best and I don't know. But what I do know is that planes do strange things to some people. Yeah. And it's not always, that was, the reason they couldn't just, as I just said, ask the family to leave is because they would miss their slot of taking off before midnight. So they had to cancel it. But there's plenty of occasions when people have been on planes and something weird happens up there. Someone behaves like either a nutter or just a weirdo. Yeah, people go off on one slightly, although one of the issues that I always seem to have when I'm on flights in the UK is that somebody's had too much to drink or taken something else before they get on the flight, and you just think, why would you do that before you got on a plane? Yes. This is not the place that you're going to be partying, no matter where it is you're going. This is insane. But people do that a lot in this country. It is a difficult one, this particular case, because, as you say, it wasn't a question of being able to just chuck them off and then everybody could go. Because, it takes time, obviously, depressurize the cabin and then get the wheel, the ladder back up and then get their luggage off the plane, all that sort of thing. That does take time. That's incredibly annoying. And without knowing the full details of this particular instance, you don't know if it's a kid that's just a badly behaved, badly raised child, or if it's, it could have been a very autistic child that's having a, very difficult time. So you don't know in that set of circumstances. And it is just your rotten luck that it's the last flight of the day, I suppose, in that sense. What I would say, if it's a badly behaved child, there is something to be said about smacking children, I think, in those certain circumstances, because it's not simply a question of everybody's time, it's money, it's all sorts of knock-on effects. Actually, at some point, I think, if not, maybe even not the child's parents, a stewardess should be able to come along and say, now, look here, I'm going to belt you one if you don't sit down, and then strap you down. But that's only if it's a badly behaved child, and that's only in extremis. But still, this is, as you say, aeroplanes, confined spaces, it's just people don't behave as they would normally do. Often you find actually people are a bit more subdued, but there are always a few people who go the other direction. It's very odd. You do wonder when the cabin crew, and I can scarcely believe they still do that strange semaphore hand movement thing when they're describing the safety of your seatbelt, and they hold up a sort of an example of a seatbelt as if you don't know what one is, and they show you connecting the seatbelt, and they do all this hand stuff. Could they not just say, and it's normally now a recording, isn't it, rather than the individual reading it out? And a laminated card on Ryanair laminated flights. Card, all of that. Could they not do, amongst their many gesticulating moments of descriptive safety rules, could they not just do a sort of fist if if failure to do this will result in this, and then the cabin crew just do the fist thing? Maybe you need a brick. You need to have a special sort of separate space on aeroplanes where you can detain people, a bit like they have on ships. Why not? Why is there not? Yes. Why are there not jails on aeroplanes? That's what we're missing. A cell at the back, because you often hear about somebody being restrained, don't you, with cable ties? Yeah. Rather than handcuffs. If you've got cable ties, why not just have some handcuffs? Truss them up and shove them in an overhead locker, maybe. I don't know. But it's... I suppose if it was a Ryanair flight, they'd charge you for the privilege of that as well. In England and Northern Ireland, parents and carers can use reasonable punishment defence under Section 58 of the Children's Act 2004. The law does not strictly define what a reasonable smack is, leaving courts to decide on case-by-case based factors like a child's age and severity. Of course, in Scotland, smacking was completely banned, so you can't do it. In Wales, corporal punishment became completely illegal in 2022, making any level of physical discipline unlawful for parents or carers. But it doesn't mention air stewardesses. But right there, there's the issue. It's up for the court to decide.
So already the implication is somebody will be investigating you if you do this at this point. And of course, this rule has been brought in to try and stop, you know, the physical abuse of children. Fair enough. But let's be clear, the actual wrong-uns are going to do it anyway. This is always about middle-class people who might need to.
Yeah, it's all very well Scotland having a pet. What if you're flying over Scotland? Where does that leave the law? Do you have to sort of whip out, Tabitha, get the GPS out, where are we? We're over Glasgow. Well, give it 5 minutes, don't worry.
Just imagine that, looking at the flight recorder and wagging your finger right up until the right. I'm going to give you one.
I once got on a first flight of the day. I was going to Malaga, couple of days in Spain. I was totally solo, really looking forward to this. I made it. I was telling Christian, our producer, this earlier. I did make a slight error with getting on the, because my thinking was get on the early flight. It's a sort of 6 a.m. flight. Malaga's what, 2 hours away, so 9 a.m. you're there. Fantastic. And I got there, got in the taxi, went to the hotel. Of course, you can't check in till 3. So I'm standing there with a flipping suitcase and a pair of trousers and not quite a jumper. But so there's a downside to the early flight. However, I got plonked in a seat. It must have been the one random seat that was available in a party of 20 on a stag do. So there I was in the middle. There's always an older bloke on a stag do, isn't it? Like the granddad or the dad or something. A load of young guys, some bloke dressed up as a woman. You know, they're wearing their football shirts, and it's clearly going to be a bit raucous. I'm right in the middle of it. I'm randomly, literally in the middle. It must have been that one seat where they went, oh, we've got a spare one there, stick him there with that lot. Now, they kind of adopted me a little bit. It was sort of quite nice in the sense that they were having fun. But, of course, as the flight went on, they drank like I've never seen. I mean, they were absolutely blotto. It got to the point where then the language started. Then a couple of them, I don't know how 22-year-old blokes know Bernard Manning routines, but they clearly did. And they went full on Bernard. And then there was some bit of salty language, bit of inappropriate language as well. Then there was an announcement, is there a doctor on board? Because there was somebody having a panic attack 3 down because it got really loud. But they kept saying to this group, boys, you've got to calm down, watch the language, please. If you don't calm down, we won't serve you any more alcohol. But they said that about half a dozen times, but they continue to serve the alcohol. Because each round must have been about 200 quid.
Yeah. I've been on a flight to Croatia where there was a stag do and a fight broke out on the plane. And what I would say is, when we landed at Split Airport, the Croatian police, they have a very specific interpretation of airport security, and it involved bundling into this place and grabbing the people in question, and I do mean beating the living snot out of them, even as they were bundling them off. But then they kept them overnight in cells, I found out later, and then just put them on a plane home the next day. That was it. There was no charges or anything like that, but many of us were asked to give statements in the airport as part of this. And you could, I'm afraid to say, you could hear the justice being meted out in the cell the other day. There was no pretense about this at all. None at all. They were just leathering into them. And it was just, you thought, oh, all right. Well. But a police officer did say, we get this every day. Every day on flights from Ireland and the UK. And you just think, wonderful. That's just the reputation that you want.
That's how they roll. Yeah. If you've experienced a little bit of that, or something else similar. I tell you what I don't like, and I've seen this a couple of times on a plane. Someone praying, and of all places.
What does this person know that I don't?
Correct. Now, I understand if you're a Muslim and you've got certain kind of conditions of your faith that dictate you pray at a certain time. You know, we're not North Korea. I get the idea, but I don't want to see somebody praying on a plane. It's the last place I want to see somebody pray at 33,000 feet.
Yeah.
What does he know?
That's not the moment. That's really
Please. And I can't get to the loo because you're sitting there on your prayer mat.
I'm sorry, that's just...
So it's...
Also, though, does he have to... If it's... I'm guessing this is a Muslim that you're talking about, given that there's a prayer mat. What if the plane sort of, like, changes direction halfway through? Does he have to move it round to, like, keep facing Mecca? I mean, it's kind of difficult
It's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, at some point, depending on the travel, you know, does it fit in the aisle in the right angle? I mean, you know, what are the technicalities about
I'm sure there is no rule that says you have to pray on the plane. I mean, if there's turbulence, what do you do during turbulence?
But I mean, it's a bit like with the Kirpan, isn't it? You know, saying that Sikhs have to be allowed to carry the ceremonial knife. Well, Sikhs have flown to the United States before, so presumably that this rule must have some leeway, because I sincerely doubt that you know that the US would let people into the country carrying large ceremonial daggers. Actually, I just don't think that would happen. In fact, I think most countries wouldn't allow that to happen. So, yes, when it comes to the issue of religious rights on aeroplanes, I suspect, actually, a lot of these things are not essential and that people are just trying to get away with one. Yes, maybe they're very devout, but maybe also somebody could say to them, it's not the time or the place. You can catch up on this with your God later.
I was just thinking, you know, this idea of whether there's life on other planets, and there's a reason I say this. I just sort of have the
front page of the Daily Star.
Front page, there it is. Yes, they're here. I was just sort of imagining somebody on planet Zog or whatever, you know, up there 20 trillion miles away, that can beam in on our conversations, thinking, what do they do down there? What are they talking about? Praying, smoking, vaping.
Maybe they do all of those. Maybe they do all of those things on Planet Zog, and it's not contentious. Maybe you can smoke whilst praying on a plane on Planet Zog, and they're just like, wow, these guys are getting really het up about this.
It could be that, or they could have done it like centuries ago, and thought, you know, like studying us is like studying sort of cavemen.
Maybe they do think. Maybe it's always Planet Zog, and I do wonder if there is a Planet Zog. If so, nobody's actually found one and named it that. That is a great disappointment. But it's very Hitchhiker's Guide to the galaxy, that. Just sort of look at all of these other people looking at us as sort of primitive cavemen and going, wow, they still think digital watches are a pretty neat thing. What a backward civilization.
Ian in Merseyside says, what is annoying is walking behind someone who is vaping and they're puffing out more smoke than a World War I battleship. There is also that. What's in those
World War I would have been a lot more fun if all the battleships smelt of sort of weird synthetic cherry. That would have been very interesting.
Yes. The bubblegum destroyer is coming. This from Bruce, who says, morning, Ian. So the mighty boats now with 200+ people on. Does this overwhelm the RNLI rescue taxes? Surely this is unsafe to attend a boat of that size with such small lifeboats that we have. Stop the boats because of health and safety. Surely the left will listen to that argument. Well, you might think... I mean, there is... And I have sympathy with this. You know, there's the humanitarian argument as well as the economic argument, the social cohesion argument, the fact that we have no idea who these 250 23-year-old fighting fit young men are or where they come from. Yeah, just the safety aspect. I mean, there was a picture. Was it a true picture? The picture of the baby getting on the boat. Was that a real picture?
I mean,
somebody literally a baby in a little onesie and, you know, being...
Yeah, I mean, they do put babies on these boats. That's a known thing. Often that they do it so that, in fact, those boats get picked up, so that people know for what...
Isn't that the point where the old Bill in France would go, sorry, boys, you're not doing that. You can't take a baby on a boat over a channel.
I think we have to remember that the police there are simply not really interested in keeping those people in France, because then they do remain a problem for the French authorities. And I have to say, I just don't blame them. I know that people get very upset and they go, but what are the French doing? You go, well, hang on, we've managed to get a situation where we've offered to pay them hundreds of millions and there's no real accountability over that, and they don't want these people to... Why wouldn't they take that deal? We would, in the same situation. Anybody would take that deal. And there is this sense of outrage because we are trying to outsource our jobs to the French. Just don't do it. Put them on the planes. Don't try and send them back to France, and don't try and get the French police to stop them. It won't happen.
Well, Chris Philp went over there, didn't he, Shadow Home Secretary, and he asked one of the cops, you know, what do you do to stop them? And the cop said, I tell them, don't do this.
I tweeted about that and said how ridiculous it is that you go and ask a French police officer to go and do that when obviously they're not going to. And I had some big Twitter account reply to me, some, you know, one of those of FPB left-wing ones going, they're not police, you liar, they're gendarmes. Oh, it's a completely different thing. I thought, oh, well, of course. Why would you ask the gendarmes? If you'd asked the police, they would have absolutely stopped them.
We're out of time, Benedict. Good to see you.
Thank
Benedict Spence with us here on Talk News at 7 is next.
What's this about you approving of Andy Burnham going on a holiday?
Yes, I do. I've written an article for the I newspaper. I think you're wrong. I think Carl Turner's wrong.
Why?
Why? Because people need holidays and we want politicians
15 days? 15 days. What nonsense are you writing in the I paper?
Do you want to take it?
15, what is he, an oil rig worker? 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off? You don't think he'll come to regret this holiday? Let me tell you, he will.
I'd rather take it now than in October, and I want our politicians to be like normal people taking a holiday in the summer, but we'll get into all of that.
That's absolute rubbish.
Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Give that a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work it out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to protect them.
Well, there's also protecting the border as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Good morning. Welcome. 3 minutes after 7 o'clock. Tuesday, 11th of August. Collins in for Kyle for the rest of this week. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. So much to get into this morning. We deconstruct the nonsense that is the summer news agenda. It's a confusing picture, as ever, as unfathomable decisions, can't even say the word, unfathomable decisions and events. It's always a bit of a Groundhog Day with our government at the moment. Let's start by looking at what appears to be the world's busiest rubber dinghy. 230 people crossing the channel yesterday on one boat. The total cost to you, the taxpayer, a possible £25 million. Yes, it's no longer a small boat crisis. These things look like something the Navy might say, bit too big for us, mate. How bad do these visuals have to get before the Prime Minister actually does something about it? More details to come. Also, Andy Burnham has vowed to save our high streets that have been dominated by vape shops, bookies and rogue businesses. High streets ain't what they used to be. They used to be not only places for retail, but there was a bit of a community vibe there for locals and families to meet up and enjoy a nice, relaxing afternoon shopping. But look at them now. How bad is your local high street, and can the Prime Minister save them? But don't get too complacent. The Prime Minister is also not your saviour, as we hear today that he plans to raise taxes by £25 billion to fund his spending pledges. A sinister warning from the UK's top economists. A socialist Prime Minister raising taxes. Who would have thought it? Apparently pensioners could be in his sights. And as we've been discussing, the flight that had to be cancelled because a kid wouldn't put their seatbelt on, they didn't just remove the one family, they actually grounded the whole flight because of timings. It's never ideal on that moment for somebody to kick off at 30,000 feet. Bad and bonkers behaviour, please, that you've witnessed in the skies. 0344 499 1000. Adrian Baird in Buckhurst Hill says, Ian, on our Emirate flight, there is a compass displaying that helps Muslims determine the direction of prayer where Mecca is, wherever the flight is in the air, and it also counts down the time until the next of 5 prayer times, one of which at dawn varies as the flight continues. It's interesting. I'd just rather not see people. This is not anything about any particular faith. I don't want to see someone praying on a plane. But you just sat there thinking, what do they know? Have they had a message from the man upstairs? What's going on? Thoughts on all of this? We'll take your voice notes on the same number, 0344 499 1000. You can message 87222. Now let's get a word from Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader, of course. Ian, good morning to you.
Good morning. Morning.
It's interesting, isn't it? It does feel we're in a sort of a bizarre, dark sitcom when it comes to the Channel crossings. How more audacious can it get? How more visual can it get? And we see this image of this massive boat. Apparently it holds more people than an EasyJet flight, which gives you some idea of how big this is. Huge cost to us, 230 people, 20 kids on there as well. It's so big, the Sun front page there this morning have actually referred you to their back page as well, where they can complete the picture of the length of the boat. I mean, you look at this and you think, you know, even, look, Andy, I've said this for a long time, we've discussed it before. If you're a left-wing Prime Minister, it's not really in your DNA to care about this. You know, we know that we talked about Gordon Brown yesterday and the Gillian Duffy moment, that bigoted woman. Even his left-wing advisors couldn't get him to talk about immigration because he couldn't go there. And I sense we're sort of in that place. You might think a big old dinghy this big would be the wake-up call for Andy Burnham, but I think the phrase "don't hold your breath" comes to mind.
Yeah, I think he hasn't seen, I think, just how important this really is to the public. And it is important to the public because what we're getting here now is a whole bunch of people invited really to the United Kingdom because we don't do anything about it when they get here except pay for them and keep them here. Yeah. And there is only one solution to this. It isn't this break the gangs. By all means, have a go at doing that and stop the dinghies. But look what's happened since they started talking about it. We've now got these mega-dinghies, which are even way more dangerous than the smaller dinghies. If that one goes over or something happens, you're going to have tens, even hundreds of people dying in the channel at one go. Wouldn't take much. A sudden turn in the wind for about 10 or 15 minutes, that dinghy is going over because it's deeply unstable. Yeah. French don't want to do anything about it. Why would they, for goodness sake? They're rather glad to see the back of these people. So it comes down to what we do. There is only one solution. It was a solution that the court stopped us doing, which we kept and said we will now get out of the Convention of Human Rights to be able to stop that. That is to say that anybody that lands here immediately, illegally, will be straight on a process that sends them straight away. In our case, it was to Rwanda, to make sure, therefore, that they can't come here, can't stay here, can't live here, or to their own homes. And we have to say to everybody, these are your citizens, it's time you took them back. If you don't want to take them back, we'll send them to another place, but you are not staying here. When we saw that announced for the first time, I remember this quite clearly, Many of those illegal migrants tried to get into Ireland, Southern Ireland, because they thought they were about to be deported. And the boats stopped briefly because they thought that if they came, all that would happen. So go and remember, they spend thousands of pounds to cross the channel. This is not ad hoc. They spend a huge amount of money just to be on that ridiculous boat because they believe once they get here, it's the land of milk and honey. And that's the trouble. And unless you get rid of the pull factor, which this government didn't want to do because it got rid of the Rwanda scheme straight away, you're looking at the result this summer. It's exactly down to the fact that we have no way of getting rid of that pull factor, which we should do. Away you go, off to another place. You're not going to stay here. It's time you went.
Let's have a reminder then, Ian, Mr. Burnham, down there in Dover. He went to, he was getting his hands dirty here, going right down to the coal face of the problem. Here's what the Prime Minister said 2 weeks ago against the White Cliffs.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years of people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent. It's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield, but we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs.
Ian, maybe you can help me out here. I constantly hear, and Mr. Burnham said it there, that the boat crossings are down by 50%. I'm hearing ministers go out on the early rounds talking about Labour's plan is clearly working because it's down by 50%. And I talk about this a lot. You and I have talked about it a lot. You're there in Parliament. You're as astute as any politician down there in Westminster. You see and hear these debates in real time. Do you, or could you even point to what specifically they are referring to when they say Labour's plan is working? I genuinely, and I'm not trying to be partisan or deliberately mischievous on this, I cannot for the life of me see what this plan that they keep pointing to is. Yes, numbers have gone down. They've gone down in the entirety of Europe, which would, that's where the smart money is, that would explain it. But they're claiming it's something they have done that has reduced the crossings.
No, there's nothing that they have done specifically since they got in that has reduced the crossing. Their great claim that they were going to smash the gangs hasn't worked. The gangs are big and strong, and look at the boats they're producing, for goodness sake. Yeah. So, first of all, that whole plan of Keir Starmer's didn't work. It doesn't work because the gangs will always find ways around this, and the French don't want to have anything to do with it. They're already swamped with people coming in across the Mediterranean. Look what's happening in Spain, for goodness sake. You know, there's thousands trying to get across and people are dying to get through. So they're already having to cope with migration coming in. And there's the whole support for the Convention of Human Rights in the European Union now is teetering. They are all coming to the same conclusion that we did, that this simply doesn't work. This is a crisis, and you have to deal with that crisis. So this idea that some are down because of the crossings, there are plenty of other ways that they're getting through to the UK. But these crossings you can just see it. That boat alone is a good example of how their plan is not working. And to go out there and to lecture the British public that somehow they've succeeded when they can see themselves on the pictures that these guys are literally, sticking two fingers up to the British authorities as they head across the channel. Yeah. And by, opening up the legal routes, well, what does that mean? It means that people coming in here will come in greater numbers anyway. Yeah. The reality we've got at the moment is we have too many people trying to pile in here into what is already an overstretched economy. So we have every right to say, no, the plan only works when they stop crossing. And when we're able to stop them crossing. And I have to come back to it. What I said at the beginning, the public knows this. The only way you will stop them crossing is to say all that money, all that effort is worth nothing. Because if you come here illegally, particularly, if you come here, you will go somewhere else, either to the country you came from or to a third country which we have agreed with. That is that. And it means that all that money you're spending, it's not worth it. The risk you're taking, children on board those boats, it's shocking. These risks are not worth it. That's the key end to the pull factor.
And
the
even
cost is greater to you.
Yeah, we remember President Macron even made that very point. Even until you stop the pull factor, you're not going to stop the boats.
Yeah, and Italy has come to that conclusion. Spain is now talking about it. All the countries of Europe now come to the conclusion that in actual fact, if you allow people to come here free and gratis like that without any requirements on them at all, the answer is they'll come in boats like this one being shown on your screen at the moment. That, and they'll get bigger, because this is our very economic way for the smugglers to be able to get people across the channel. It takes one person sitting, steering the boat, and the rest are all migrants, as you said, bigger than a normal jetliner.
Unbelievable. We are going to talk more about that throughout the course of the show. This subject as well, Ian, Andy Burnham vowing to get tough on high streets that have been hollowed out by vape shops, bookies and rogue businesses. No matter where we live, we've all seen the same thing, proliferation of iffy barbers' shops that seem to pop up when there's already 20 in the town, and the Prime Minister is planning to crack down on lax planning rules that have been blamed for the decline of town centres. I don't know what Chingford High Street's looking like these days, but it does seem to be a pretty uniform picture across the country. They ain't what they used to be.
No, actually our Station Road, the main high street, the north end of Chingford, is still a good high street, and we've done a lot of work, and it's very important this, we've done a lot of work with the police to make sure that all the bigger shops always record the crime immediately to the police. The police then have an obligation to come. So shoplifting, antisocial behaviour are the two elements that are destroying our high streets. And the police need now to make sure they're there the whole time, and that shops, we discovered that other bigger shops, you know, some of the sort of mini supermarkets that exist on these high streets, which are really important because they bring people to the high street, then they go to all the smaller shops. It's important and vital that they record crime and they get the police to come, because up until quite recently they were not doing that on our high streets, and we had to force them to say you must report the crime to the police, otherwise they won't come to the street. The second thing is to give local authorities the power to say no to certain shops. You know, adult gaming centres are proliferating, and all they do is they bring poor souls who are addicted to gambling, spending all their life savings, ending in destruction for them in their lives, into these things, gambling all through the night. These sort of centres are really detrimental to high streets, and they shouldn't be allowed in more than ones, maybe at most. And the reality right now is the council has no power to stop those shops opening in clusters, and that has to stop because they bring the council, the area down. I'm not against a normal betting shop. They're very straightforward, they are what they do, and keeping those under control is fine. But it's these sort of shops that you're talking about that are antisocial. And as for the barbers and the vape shops, a lot of these ones are involved in criminality. So kids that, or people that steal from the shops, take them straight round to these shops and they sell them under the counter. And that has to stop as well. The police have got to crack down on that and give them pretty long sentences. So all of that has to be done if we're going to keep the high streets relevant. And they are relevant. They should be relevant for pensioners, for older people, for younger people. They're really important. They're a lifeblood of our communities, bringing people together. So they need to be taken seriously. So if he has any plans at all, that's what he has to do. It's cracking down on antisocial behaviour, locking people up. I don't care if he's having too many people in prison. Lock them up, make sure they understand their crime is punishable and they'll get caught, and keep those antisocial shops off the high street. That would do. That's a start.
Apparently there's a curtailing of decision makers, in that if somebody buys or rents a unit in a high street and says, I want to open a vape shop or a barber's, you might think the local council would look at the list and go, well, that's very entrepreneurial of you, sir, but we've already got 25 barber shops, so we don't need another one. Apparently they're not allowed to do that.
No, they're not.
And I understand, you know, do we really want politicians telling people what businesses they can start and can't start? So notionally I get it, but there surely is a point where one could argue something, you know, often you want to start something or do something and the initiative fails because it's not conducive with the public good or not conducive with the aesthetics of an area. It seems extraordinary that councils are curtailed from making that decision.
Yeah, I don't know when it all started, but I do know we've run into this in the last 2 years. We've been having my colleagues and I, the councillors, a real crackdown on the high street. And we've really had to force the police, and they've been good now because they come out to the high street and they patrol the high street. It's not perfect, but we have nabbed a number of these people. We actually filmed them. They didn't really care, these shoplifters. They're part of gangs. Gangs have moved in, and that's the problem. So councils need to have that power, not to overuse the power, but the power to stop clusters of shops opening up. These shops are not the sort of shops that most of the public go to. You know, the vaping shops and the excessive barber shops that grow up. Lots of them, I'm not saying all of them, but lots of them end up in criminality. And what we want to do is stamp that out straight away. What we want is a proper functioning high street that has got variation, different shops, and there's people happy to come with their children and spend time there. You know, the odd pub where they go to have a drink, but they take their kids in, get a meal or whatever. That sort of thing is what we want. We don't want this sort of constant level of crime that takes place, and the police have got to be there. I did say to the police the other day, it's the number one problem you face is antisocial behaviour. If you get rid of that, the public will thank you, because that stops them in any way being able to do anything on their high streets. So do that and you'll bring people back to the high streets.
Common sense stuff. Ian, thank you very much for your time. Good to speak again. Ian Duncan-Smith, former Conservative Party leader and, of course, MP for Chingford too. And Woodford Green as well, just to bolt that on the end. This one in from Linda in Deal. In the 1990s, my husband worked for a private IT company. One of his jobs was to fix any problems on the computer system of a prison ship in Dorset. We lived in Bromley and he had to drive overnight. Sometimes prisoners will be unable to be released, says Linda. Wow. There are prison ships, which is interesting to know. Thank you, Linda, for that. Lots more to come. We'll talk prisons in a second. Vanessa Frake, big spokesperson on prisons. She is a former prison governor, knows the terrain really well. Her take on that. Your take on the big boat. The big boat. It's the biggest one ever. More people than an EasyJet airliner arrived in Dover yesterday. It's absolutely huge. It's absolutely costly and it's absolutely unacceptable. What is our Prime Minister going to do about it? As we sit here at 7:20, absolutely nothing. Thoughts on that as well? The decline of your high street, weird stuff you've seen at 30,000 feet in the air. This is reference people behaving badly on planes. More on that to come, and voice notes aplenty on 0344 499 1000. Here's one from Adrian on that issue of the big boats. Morning, Adrian.
Morning, Ian. Morning, Benedict. It's Adrian from East Sussex. Just very quickly, that boat is clearly unseaworthy. There's no way they would have used a boat of that size unless they knew they had the support of both the French government to get it to the halfway point and then the British government to bring it back the rest of the way to the UK. And of course, you've then got all of the charities, British charities, working against the interest of the British people.
We've been on the beaches for 2 days running. Both days we've been hassled by the local French police. They've turned up armed to the teeth, looking very aggressive. We've had to arm ourselves, actually, with gas masks. They're checking our ID, wanting to know what we're doing here. They should show as much enthusiasm, I think, with the migrants. They seem to be waving them through and hassling us. But this morning, they asked for my ID. I told them to clear off. I said, you got it yesterday. You're not hassling me on the beach on my morning stroll.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, morning, 23 minutes after 7 o'clock. Betty says, Ian, I was on one of the last Antonov flights to Moscow back in 1999 and we could smoke in the back 4 rows. Pilots came down and joined us. Still have wooden toilet seats back then and glass in the nose where the bomber used to sit. Happiest flight ever. I love that. I flew back from Australia a lot of years ago. I was only young, and I think it was possibly one of the last flights you could smoke on, and it was exactly as Betty just said, the last 4 rows. You could have a cigarette on. What do you think about it? It doesn't take much thought to realise how extraordinary and rather stupid that is, particularly for people who don't smoke. If you're on the 5th row from the back, I think you cop the lot, don't you? Ray in Norfolk, calling airport's terminal doesn't help when you're of a nervous disposition. Yes, the last thing you want to see, isn't it, when you jump on a flight as a nervous passenger? The word terminal. Not good. Leslie says, I hope the pilot wasn't the one praying. Yeah, I was talking about people praying on flights. You don't want to see that, really. Margaret in Birmingham, shopping with your mum, great memories. My favourite day was when my mum collected her family allowance. It was 7 and 6, now about 35p. We got to buy a comics school friend for me and the Eagle for my brother. Happy days. We used to go to, I don't know whether it was a chain of supermarkets called International. Was that a chain or was it a one-off? But it was prominent in the high street. This was in Ashford in Kent. And you could go in there and have my mum would go for a coffee and we'd have a sausage roll or something between, or a cake or something. And it was absolutely exciting for that. It was just wonderful. And the high street was just full of colour as well, because there were so many different shops, and obviously there were some chains there like W.H. Smith's or Millet's and things like that. I think Littlewoods and a couple of others, John Menzies, etc. But there were just so many different shops, and it's the colour of that high street that I can see when I look back at it. And yes, it was exciting, apart from when your mum bumped into a friend and you spent 20 minutes going, Mum, can we go now? Can we go now? And then eventually you'd go, and then she'd bump into another friend. But going into town was, as Margaret said, it was a moment, it was a thing. And there were no out-of-town outlets. There's none of that kind of big carpet shops and, you know, when you get the Halfords and the pets at home thing, all of that caper. None of that existed, of course. 0344 499 1000. Now, what's going on with our prisons? We continue to read that Labour plans to release thousands of killers, thugs and paedophiles set to be thrown into chaos as probation officers expected to vote in favour of industrial action. Wow. Could it get any worse? Only one person to speak to, Vanessa Frake, Justice Advisor for Reform UK and former prison governor. To Vanessa, morning to you. I mean, this, whatever way you slice it, this is an absolute mess. This is carnage.
Well, you know, it can't get much worse, to be honest. I think the whole justice system is literally on its knees. And I think that in all this early release scheme, you know, we've kind of forgotten about who's actually going to monitor these individuals once they're released. My own point is that probation are already overworked. They're already understaffed, and another 5,000 prisoners, although it's not going to be all in one go, is still going to be a tremendous workload to monitor these individuals correctly.
Where do we go with this overarching story about overcrowding, Vanessa? I know this has been talked to death about this, but I mean, it's so curious. It's sort of up there with the Channel Crossing story, where nobody can work out, isn't there anyone who can do something about this? And you think of all the things we can do in the 21st century, of all the capabilities we have, the great brains that are out there, not usually in Westminster, but the great brains that exist in other places. Nobody can solve this one. You know, we just haven't got enough places. There's no initiative that's really addressing the severity of the problem.
No, and the problem is that, you've got politicians who keep coming up with these weird and wonderful things and not thinking of the consequences. So they lengthen sentences, but they don't build infrastructure to cope with the number of extra prisoners that's going to have.
Yeah.
So they shut down prisons, but they don't open new prisons to put those procedures in place. So over the years, through COVID, the lack of the slowness of our courts, this has built up over several years. I mean, we're talking 20 years, and they've known about it, but they've chosen to ignore it because, you know, investing in our prison system isn't what public want their money to be invested in. And I totally understand that. They'd much rather it go to the NHS or to education, something like that. But now we're at the point where we're overflowing. And of course, that brings its own difficulties.
It really does. When you were governing prisons and you were in charge, did you, I mean, were there times even then when you could see the system squeaking somewhat?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there were times that we were looking around for extra beds and putting cells that were out of order back in order, which we shouldn't have done really. But we had no choice. When we said we were full, they were saying, well, can you not squeeze another couple in? So, like I said, you know, this has been going on for decades. It's not a new thing. You know, when Jack Straw was Home Secretary, he did an early release scheme then in the early 2000s. You know, he released over 80,000 prisoners on an early release scheme. So, you know, we've known about it. And politicians, in my view, should hold their heads in shame because, you know, they're moving the problems from prisons into the communities and to victims and survivors of crime.
Is there anything, I mean, you mentioned there about bringing cells back into operation that have previously been declared not fit for use or whatever the phrase is. I mean, logistically, within existing prisons, is that more of an option than we hear about? Could you put more than one or two people in a cell? Is that a no-no, or is there literally no space? What's the deal at the coalface?
Well, most prisons at the moment are running over capacity anyways. So you've got single cells that have probably got 2 or maybe even 3 prisoners in it. And of course, that causes issues as well because it's only a small space.
Yeah.
Some may say, well, you know, don't do the crime. Exactly. But they have, and we've got to put them somewhere. But look, I think there are things that we can do. We've got a lot of foreign nationals. There's around about 10, 11,000 of them. About 6,500 of those are convicted and could quite easily be shunted off somewhere, whether that's back to their home countries or indeed look at hiring prison cells from other countries, whether that's European or further. Other countries have done that.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention that because Reform, of course, is talking about speaking with the government of El Salvador. I understand you're going to be travelling there to find out.
Apparently so, yeah.
To find out a bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, I'm not saying that, you know, El Salvador's got 10,000 spaces ready for you know, UK prisoners.
I bet they have for the right money, Vanessa.
Well, you know, that's another thing. You know, is it cost effective? And of course, you know, just because you move prisoners from this country to another country to serve their sentence doesn't mean to say that you release your responsibilities of that prisoner. So, you know, if a deal that can be made that's legal, secure, humane and cheaper than building and operating another British prison, why wouldn't you consider it? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but certainly look into it. There's nothing wrong in looking that. You know, these are desperate times and you've got to take the bull by the horns and try everything possible. I
wonder if there is, you know, a complete change in the law in terms of how people are sentenced in that respect, that you say to somebody, I don't know, you know, some drug mule from Albania, and there's a huge disproportionate number of Albanians. It might even be the biggest group in British jails, that you couldn't say upon sentencing you will be immediately deported back to Albania. I mean, you won't even serve any prison sentence here.
Yeah, I mean, and we have a treaty with Albania, so it shouldn't be that difficult to send these people back. But yeah, I mean, anything is possible, isn't it?
Anything is possible, but where there's a will, and it seems that I don't know what happens in the world of government. I don't know whether you become an MP or a minister and then somebody sort of injects you, or you undergo a procedure where all common sense and sanity is spectacularly removed, and you're left with what once upon a time, you had big ideas before you became... It's like becoming the Prime Minister, isn't it? You've got a big to-do list. We've all got a to-do list. If I was Prime Minister, I would do this. And then you get into the job. Does somebody take you in a room and say, by the way, that list you've got, stick it in the shredder, because it ain't worth a bean, mate. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is that, Alex Norris, no disrespect to him, but he's never had anything to do with the justice system. And he's now the prisons minister. This is the third prisons minister in 3 years. So, if somebody stuck at the job and really took the bull by the horns and listened to not necessarily me, but governors, governing governors, the staff on the ground, and spent a day working in a prison, see how it, but they don't.
No, they never do. But thank goodness for people like yourself, Vanessa, who can speak with real authenticity and experience. Great to have you on with us. More than appreciated. Vanessa Frake, Justice Advisor for Reform UK and former prison governor as well. She knows her way around C-Wing like few others. We're going to be speaking back on immigration. Kevin Foster is a former immigration minister under the Conservatives. What will he have to say on this massive boat, if you haven't seen the story? Not so small boat crisis. There's the front page of The Sun this morning. The boat is so big that the Sun newspaper, doesn't often happen this, have decided to show the picture on the back page as well. If you're watching in Vision, if you're watching, it would be in Vision. If you're watching us on our YouTube feed, you can see it there for yourself. You've got to turn to the sports page on the back to get the full entirety of this boat. Bigger than an EasyJet plane. 200 and odd folk landing yesterday in Dover, 230 to be precise. 20 kids were on there as well. Some of these people look like they're on a Beano to Ibiza, frankly. The waters were calm and they kept on coming. 230 on one boat. What does a wake-up call look like to this government? Just asking. 0344 499 1000. More voice notes, comments on the way. Details to come. 25 to 8. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. Lots to get through. The state of your high street, the state of our prisons, the state of our seas. Goodness me. Kerry in Coventry says, I live on a main road and within 1 mile drive we've got 6 barbers shops. We used to have 2. The other concern is the carpet shops in a 1 mile drive, which never have customers in. Makes you wonder. There's a lot of those as well. Big old carpet places. And the sweet shops, I think this is more... I'm not talking about, the little corner shop that sells sweets, the legit ones, these kind of confectionery places. They're all over the place, mostly in larger cities. There's one just near where we are here, and it's quite small. It's not quite a nook in the wall, but it's just a smallish place. I've never seen anyone in there when I've gone in there sometimes to buy some chewing gum. And that's it. I've never seen anyone in there. The rent to have a shop at London Bridge and the business rates must be, I would be confident enough to say that shop cannot possibly even wash its face. It could not possibly get enough income to cover its rent and its business rates. I'd be confident enough to say it's impossible. You'd have to be making 10 grand a day in that place, in that ballpark, to make it work. No one in there. It's small. No one in there. Why would you do that? And why would you set up next to kind of a big Smith's, which is just nearby? 2 of them, in fact. I mean, that would be like, well, why would we put a confectionery shop next to one of the biggest shops that sells that stuff anyway? It's mind-boggling, kids. 0344 499 1000. So this mega dinghy, there it is on the front page. I mentioned it. Even the visuals of this, you might think that if you were in this case, a Labour minister that wasn't really on board, no pun, with the whole channel crossing thing, you might think somebody would go into work today and go, Prime Minister, mate, look at this. 230 people on one boat. Or you can come at this from the if you feel more comfortable talking about the humanitarian side, then that's also a valid argument. This is ridiculous. The size of an EasyJet plane just landed in Dover with 230 people, including 20 kids on board. What does it take? Let's speak to Kevin Foster, former immigration minister, former Conservative MP as well for Torbay. Kevin, morning to you. You've had experience of these meetings. You've seen the incredulity. You've seen grown men sweat trying to discuss what appears to be the Gordian knot of our times. You might think that this particular story, it's a long list of stories, as you and I have discussed many times, but this particular one, the photo can't even fit on the front page of a newspaper, for goodness sake. They've had to put it also on the back page as well. Wouldn't this be the wake-up call for Andy Burnham?
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. And this could have been a disaster in the making. If that boat had punctured halfway across the channel, 230 people straight in the water, by the time you'd managed to pull even half of them out, the other half would have almost certainly been in difficulty. You know, the water in the channel is deep and cold, even at this time of year. So, you know, you'd have been looking at significant loss of life. And just the image of this, you know, as you say, more than a EasyJet, a 737 would carry arriving into the country just shows that you are going to have to make a big response to this problem. And numbers, they say, are down on last year, but it's worth noting they're about the same as they were in 2023 when 30,000 arrived. That, you know, we Conservative Party at the time, rightly, got a lot of criticism around that, including from the Labour Party.
Yes, of course.
Who said that as long as you could smash the gangs, it would all be solved. Well, just focusing on law enforcement isn't going to deal with this. There are models that the government could adopt. There are ways of solving this. But unless they really move forward into areas that are probably quite uncomfortable for Labour MPs to deal with, like, you know, making it easier to remove people back to countries, including removing people to places like Afghanistan, then they're going to carry on seeing these types of headlines and all the impacts this then means here in our country.
Labour keep telling us, you will have heard this many times, Kevin, and in fact, let's have a little listen to the Prime Minister speaking, because as you will be aware, 2 weeks ago he went down to Dover. He wasn't messing around, our Andy, because he's a normal bloke that likes white bread and pork scratchings. He does normal things, Kevin, and things like going to Dover to talk about the problem. If you've got the white cliffs behind you, somehow you authenticate your credibility. Well, that's what he thought, at least. Here's what he said just a fortnight back.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period.
Well, we can see him. We
can't
quite hear him.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years of people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent. It's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield, but we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs.
So that's a basic claim, and I've heard it repeated, Kevin, many times by ministers when they're doing the media rounds, that the reason that there are fewer boats at the moment compared to this time last year is because of what Labour are doing. And I've genuinely trying to be completely objective about this, trying to work out what it is they have specifically done that would stop a bunch of blokes who were previously intending on jumping on a boat to not jump on a boat. I cannot genuinely, again, I'm being objective, completely fair, I cannot think of a single thing they've done that would make that happen.
Yeah, I think if I was to look at some things that perhaps have been done, and I'm no fan of the current government, as the intro of me would reveal, it's probably been some of the change of rhetoric, for example, and some of the changes that Shabana Mahmood has proposed bringing forward. For example, reducing the abilities on things like family reunion and other areas, which has started to reduce the incentives to cross in a small boat, but it's certainly not gone anywhere near as far enough as you'd need to go to end this problem. And just saying, I'm going to be relentless. Okay, great. At what? What are you going to be relentless at? It's like sometimes we hear, let's declare an emergency. Okay, that's great. Yeah, let's declare an emergency. But what are you declaring the emergency to do? What are you actually looking to do? Because it's easy to get a headline. It's not quite so difficult to deliver an actual solution. And I think if Andy Burnham really wanted to solve this problem, then I'd say, actually, rather than going to Dover, the places he needs to go are Australia and the United States, where you could actually see comparable countries. We're not talking dictatorships here. We're talking modern democracies with good, decent human rights records, who have managed to deal with similar problems. The boats going towards Australia and the massive crossings going on of the US southern border. And neither of them have dealt with this with some of the headline grabbers we've heard in the last week or two, but they have dealt with a problem of their border being penetrated. And that's been a wider strategy that reduces the incentives to come and massively increases your chances of being removed. When you do that, that's when the numbers really drop down.
When you were, I know I asked you this before, I'm not trying to be mischievous here, Kevin, but obviously, a lot of this happened, most of this happened under the last government. You were an immigration minister. Were they kind of, was it almost the thick of it territory where you would sit in a room and kind of come up with ever more imaginative ideas, like an episode of Roadrunner? I think we've got, you guys being the coyote trying to catch the problem. And somebody would stand there with a flip chart saying, well, we could do this, and then there's a government lawyer going, no, you can't do that. Was it as basic and as crude as that?
I can remember what we started to look at was what were the countries, as I've just alluded to, had managed to solve a similar problem. And certainly myself, Tom Pursglove and Priti Patel, we looked at Australia. So it's actually, for example, where the Rwanda plan idea came from. Yep. We didn't just come up with that, sat in a room off the top of our heads. We looked at what Australia had done, and part of it was a third country solution. Because if you have someone arrive who you can't return to France because they refuse, and you can't return to their home country because, for example, it's a country you just can't deal with, or just point blank refuses to take returns, and in some cases you don't have too many levers. We don't do much trade with them. We don't issue many visas anyway. Where do you send them? And that's what Australia said. You need to answer that question, because if you can, then you start to create more of a deterrent. More people know they're going to be removed from the country. Yep. They can't just think, oh, well, even if you turn my asylum claim down, you're going to be stuck with me. So we went through some of that process. I think where I'd say the problem comes is then when sometimes you were dealing with other people in government, you thought, but my SPAD, my special advisor, political advisor, come on, has read some sort of idea and some clever strategy. I particularly found when, for example, I didn't serve under Mr. Sunak, but, for example, he was going to declare an emergency and do some bits, and it was going to be an emergency, and he was going to treat it as an emergency. Well, that was great, but again, it was a slogan in the way Keir Starmer was sitting there saying, I'm going to smash the gangs and just enforce the law. Sure. Law enforcement has made a difference, to be fair. One of the reasons why we're seeing bigger boats is probably because of some issues now in terms of supply of outboard engines, but it hasn't fundamentally dealt with the problem that if you come to this country and you come from a country like Afghanistan, the government's clear it doesn't do returns there. It can't return someone to France, and it's got no third country agreement, which means even if your claim's turned down, we're going to be stuck with you. And that is what's really driving this crisis.
Indeed. Kevin, thank you for your time. Appreciated as ever. Kevin Foster, former immigration minister under the Conservatives. I can already, whenever we talk to a Conservative Home Office minister in any respect, we always get a flurry of people go, well, hang on a second, they were literally in charge. The Navy, the government will say, that ain't going to work. We haven't got the boats, and even if we did, what are they physically going to do? No one can solve this. I swear, we're going to look back. I can almost see us all on our deathbeds going, did they ever solve the Channel? No, dear. No. Still coming. But it was 30 years ago, 50 years ago. No, still coming on the boats. They're just bigger now. they're actually ships. A load came on the Ark Royal yesterday. You kind of see it sort of unfolding in this kind of chaotic way. 0344 499 1000. We're going to take a very brief pause. Let's get a voice note on all things boat related. This comes in from James. Morning, James.
Morning, Ian. It's James from Hull here. I'm a long-time listener of the show, so keep up the good work. I just want to say, with regards to the boat crisis, nothing is ever going to change. It's not in Labour's priorities to stop the boats. They've got more left-wing policies to bring into play, and they're not actually doing, or should I say, Andy Burnham's not actually doing anything to, of grand scale, to improve the lives of the British people. And I don't think that's ever going to change. It's just another puppet for the Labour Party. So we need somebody to come in via a general election, such as maybe reform, to turn this boat around, or turn the boats around, so to speak. Keep up the good work.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Oh, do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, it is Talk. On that issue of flights, one comes in here from Wayne, says, on a flight to Singapore, we had a very sad incident of an elderly Asian man passing away in the middle of the night. We had the is there a doctor on board call. Now, I'm a bit of an aviation geek, so I'm fully aware that most long-haul flights have corpses cupboards, believe it or not. However, when I went to the toilet, I saw the family crying and the man that had passed away still sitting in his seat. I felt this was very sad and shocking, so I asked the flight attendant why they didn't use the cupboards. The flight attendant said it was already in use. Sorry, it's not really funny. So this poor family had to spend 6 hours sitting, eating and drinking in the middle row next to their dead loved one. Man alive. After speaking to the flight attendants, it is not uncommon for deaths to happen mid-flight. The saddest and most disturbing flight I've ever been on. I mean, it is sort of dark satire in the sense, I'm sorry, we've already got one in the cupboard. I mean, it's... What do you do about that? I mean, do you put a... I'm not being unkind. Do you put a blanket over the deceased's head? Do you, I don't know, put a bag of crisps in their lap so it looks normal? I don't know. pretend. I mean, at night, I suppose people might think they're asleep. That is genuinely sad. And I mean, I appreciate, you know, the darkness and the gallows humour that I'm slightly employing here. But that is a very sad thing to happen on mid-flight. It's not the way I'd want to go. I guess it largely depends. I mean, if I was going to, I don't know, the Isle of Man or something, I'd be devastated. If I was off to Bermuda, I might take that. Robbie says, as an 18-year-old in the early 80s, I was accused of criminal damage on a Friday night. On the Saturday morning, I was in front of the magistrate. I got a bit gobby, so the magistrate refused bail, so I went to Brixton Prison. It was so full, they had 3 to a cell and had to throw a mattress onto the landings. I luckily got bail on Monday and the charges were dropped. Glad to hear it, Robbie. We've turned his life around miraculously now. Let's get a word on the big issues of the day. Linda Jubilee, regular with us on the programme, is here. Morning to you, Linda.
Good morning, Ian. And can I throw a little bit of light on that subject?
Please do.
Of the corpses on the aircraft, because sadly, I was on a transatlantic flight and a man died on board and they did put a blanket over him.
Did they?
Yes.
Over his head?
Yes. Well, you know, they're little. Those airline blankets are all very little.
Yes.
So it kind of went over his head, but his legs were exposed.
Right. Yeah, so not over much of him at all, really, bar his head.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's a... you know, what do you do? I didn't know about the corpse cupboards until Wayne just mentioned it on his message there. The special cupboards where you can put someone in. But I just think it's quite disturbing, isn't it? It's not disturbing in terms of your own safety. It's not like it's very sad. You know, there's someone, you know, most people, you speak to police officers who go their whole career without seeing a corpse. So the last place you want to see one is, you know, on a flight to Ibiza.
But when you think about it, especially on long-haul flights, there are hundreds of people on board, and some of them are quite elderly. And flying does have its... My dad was an aviation engineer, and flying does have its hazards. And one of those, for example, people get DVTs unless they wear the compressive socks.
Yeah.
You know, they've got heart problems. They've got lots of problems. So it's not unexpected that, indeed, there is a corpse cupboard.
Yes, it does. It does make sense, doesn't it? It's a thoroughly boring experience, really, isn't it? Flying. I mean, there's a bit of you. It's a bit like I don't know, jet washing a patio. It's good for one slab, and then you think, I wish I hadn't started this. And the same with a flight. For about 10 minutes, you think, oh, this is great. I'm nice and comfortable. I've got my music, and then you look at the clock and think, I've got 6 hours of this. But listen, it's the 21st century. We're not complaining about the beauty of air travel. We are complaining about the beauty of sea travel, however, and that's when 230 people can jump on a rubber dinghy. 230 people, which is the amount of people that would fit into a normal EasyJet flight, by the way, to bring that back in. So it's a massive amount of people on one boat. It clearly can't be safe. Quite how they got this thing through the streets of Calais onto, I mean, presumably it's in a box of some sort, but that wouldn't come in a cardboard box that the Amazon bloke would deliver, would it? I mean, that's massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of these mega boats arrived a couple of weeks ago, and that took just short of 170 people. But the thing about these boats is that they are very, very unstable.
Yeah.
The bigger they are, the more unstable they are. Because if you imagine, right in the middle of that boat is a very unsafe place to be. And what I was hearing yesterday when this whole thing was being discussed was that one of the really, really heinous things that some of the traffickers are doing is they're pushing out little boats first as decoys to detract from the bigger boat, to get the bigger boat through. And of course, the little boats don't make it, and all those people just get thrown out and pulled back ashore again. So the traffickers definitely want these big boats to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely right. I keep coming back to the same, and I know I sound like a stuck record here, Linda, but you know, if ever there was, even by the woeful standards of governments, and we have to include the last one in this, but particularly acute with a Labour government, because we know their heart's not really in this story in the same kind of way. They don't perceive this as a sort of humanitarian crisis in the same way that we would look at a famine in Ethiopia back in the day. So that's their sort of take on it. So they don't have the same levels of either incredulity or even anger that most right-minded people should have. But even by their standard, you might think Burnham would look at this and go, now that is the wake-up call.
Yeah. So what I think here is that he's going to have to listen to this at some point, because if there is not an MP or a politician anywhere on the planet that refuses to listen to a prime issue for the voter.
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing they want, it's to be voted in next time. Now, I was very interested in what the previous caller, James, was saying, because he was saying he didn't. He believed this obviously is a very serious problem. He was disheartened because he didn't think there was a solution. He thought that Andy Burnham would be so sidetracked by his vision for this country, and he has made no secret that his vision is that this country took a wrong turn 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And like the captain of an ocean-going liner, if you like the analogy, he simply has to turn round on its axis and get the country back again. But the fact of the matter is he's off on his listening project round the country, and there are only a few issues that really bother the public. So I'm not quite sure whether this is a cosmetic activity or not, but it's immigrants, NHS, social care, benefits and cost of living. And for many people, immigration, illegal immigrants, is at the top of that list. So he ignores it at his peril.
One in a message from Gary, Linda, who puts it rather well. He says, if these boats get much bigger, they won't have to set sail from France. The migrants will be able to climb on the back of one on the beach in Calais and walk to the front to arrive on the beach in Dover. I mean, he's not far wrong on there when you look at the size of this beast that's just arrived.
But you know what really worried me as well, as I was listening to an immigration official saying yesterday that actually the shortest crossings were now quite difficult for the traffickers to manage.
Yeah.
So some of them have gone as far as Zeebrugge, and the guy was saying, actually, that's a death sentence, virtually a death sentence for those on board.
Wow.
So you can't ignore how much money is involved here for these traffickers. This is organised crime writ large across the whole of Europe. This is more important in some respects than drug trafficking.
You're not wrong, Linda. Thank you very much indeed for that. This is Talk.
It is therefore my honour to declare that the duly elected leader of the Labour Party is Andy Burnham.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. I believe in all of you, and I am confident we can do it. Thank you very much. I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be.
This man has no mandate whatsoever. He didn't stand on the 2024 general election manifesto. You cannot make the biggest change in British politics in 40 years without a mandate from the British people, and it will be only decent, right and proper to call a general election on that issue and to do it now.
Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho, the speed this all happened, I know this is a well-trodden debate already, is actually breathtaking. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago he wasn't even an MP. The next he's holding keys to number 10 without the country ever really having a chance to scrutinise him in a prospective prime ministerial nothing at all. We really know very little.
I think Burnham has to walk a fine line. I think that's probably what's going on, because if he were to sweep into Downing Street and say, I'm going to change everything, I'm going to fix everything, I'm going to do things completely differently to Starmer, then people would say, hold on, mate, we need a general election in that case, because no one voted for that. No one voted for you to be Prime Minister. You weren't standing in the 2024 general election. We've never seen your manifesto. Who the hell are you? That's what people would be asking.
the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Breakfast. Yeah, good morning. Welcome to the programme. It's a Tuesday. It's the 11th of August. Colin's in for Kyle for the remainder of this week. So much to get through, as ever, deconstructing the nonsense that is the summer news agenda. It just keeps on giving. The stories are huge, they're incredulous, and they will make you angry. This country is on, well, I wouldn't say a wobble. It's pretty much broken, but it can be fixed, we'd like to think. Let's start by looking at what appears to be the busiest rubber dinghy ever seen. 230 people crossing the channel yesterday in one boat. By the way, the total cost to you, the taxpayer, £25 million, about 106,000 quid per person. 25 million for that one boat. This is no longer a small boat crisis. These boats look like something the Navy might use when going into battle. How bad do the visuals have to get before the Prime Minister says, do you know what, I'm going to do something about this? I'll have some pork scratchings and then I'm off. Speaking of him, Andy Burnham has vowed to save the high streets that have been dominated by vape shops, bookies and rogue businesses. High streets ain't what they used to be. Remember, they used to be places not just of retail, but there was a community hub feel for locals and families to meet up, do a nice bit of shopping. But look at them now. How bad is your local high street? And do you recognise the vape-based description and the barbers of what's going on? Can the Prime Minister save them? Don't get too complacent about our Prime Minister, because this is the same man, not your saviour, by the way, who's about to raise, so we hear today, your taxes by 25 billion quid to fund his spending pledges. This is the sinister warning from the UK's top economists. A socialist Prime Minister raising taxes. Who would have thought it? Pensioners, apparently, could be in his sights. Where or who is going to get hit? And the flight that had to be cancelled because a kid wouldn't put their seatbelt on. They didn't just remove the one family, they actually grounded the whole flight because of the timings. It's never comfortable being at 30,000 feet when someone goes rogue. But if you've experienced the bad or bonkers behaviour of your fellow airline passenger, tell us more. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get in touch, or leave a voice note. You can message us on 87222. David in sunny Preston. It's sunny everywhere today, by the way. I always mention Lerwick. I don't ever recall taking a call from Lerwick. It's part of the Shetland Isles. When you watch the news, it's the most northerly point that gets mentioned on the weather map. So it's right up there. I mean, it has very long, light days and I think equally very dark winters. So it's got that kind of... It's nearer Scandinavia than it is many parts of the UK. But it always seems to be a perpetual 14 degrees there. So when it's 35 in Manchester or London, it's 14 degrees in Lerwick. If you were in Lerwick, I'd love to hear from you. I don't know whether anyone has ever contacted us from that part of the... We've had calls from the Shetland Islands, I'm sure we have. Do let us know. But yeah, it's going to be an absolute beauty out there today. But, of course, it's going to get hotter. It means we are officially still... The drought extended to cover almost three-quarters of England alone, as officials warn record-breaking conditions are worsening. 27 million people face water restrictions. I think it was yesterday we talked about car washes and swimming pools being affected by this as well. We're surrounded by flipping water, by the way. We are an island. It's got a lot of water around us, by definition of being an island. The solar eclipse to give brief respite from the heat wave. How brief would that be? How long does a solar eclipse... Is this tomorrow, that eclipse thing? So you get 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, you get 2 minutes of no sunshine. Is that respite? Would you call that respite? Oh, it's right cooled down in here, Harry, isn't it? Yeah, but the eclipse, love. Really? That's called night time. It cools down anyway. Even on a hot day, it cools down. Am I the only bloke? Am I the only person that isn't that bothered about an eclipse? I mean, some people go, oh my God, there's an eclipse. Have you seen it? No, I didn't really notice. I was in the loo at the time, or watching the EastEnders omnibus. I don't know, whatever I was doing. I will be there for that. Have we got goggles, by the way, in this building? Because you're meant to be wearing goggles. You don't look at the sun. Because you take your eyeballs out, apparently. It's like a furnace up there, by definition. Let's get a word from Sarah Pochin, Reform MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Sarah, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Are you in eclipse? Are you one of those people that is, like, bowled over by the eclipse?
I'm a little bit like you. I always seem to be in the wrong place.
Yes.
I never quite managed to see it.
I don't ever recall a moment where 1 minute it was light and then it was dark. I know it's not fully dark, but it goes a bit moody, doesn't it? Apparently a bit grey.
Well,
I honestly can't... People keep going, do you remember the one in 2024? And I go, no, I don't.
Well, I'm going to be down on the south coast, so I'm hoping that as I look out to sea at about 7 o'clock tomorrow night, I will see my first eclipse properly and be totally bowled over by it.
You won't see a solar eclipse. You'll see 230 people on a 49-foot boat, Sarah. That's what you're more likely to see on the south coast.
Well, look, it's so frightening now, isn't it?
That would cause an eclipse in itself, wouldn't it?
How far do the people of this country... how far are we going to push the people of this country until the government does something about it? And their rhetoric about, oh, well, the numbers have gone down in the last year, in the last 2 years since the Labour government. Look, the evidence is in front of our eyes. That's a boat with 230 people on it. We don't know who on that boat has criminal records. We don't know who on that boat is potentially looking at this country through terrorist eyes, through terrorist groups. We don't know who is coming into this country. And Andy Burnham has done nothing to tell the people what he is going to do about this problem. It's not a problem, it's a crisis.
You might think, and I keep labouring this point this morning, Sarah, and I appreciate I'm on a hiding to nothing with this, but you might think even by, you know, the previous government were rubbish at this. This government are arguably even worse because we know that politically they're not really engaged in this subject. Their weather vane never points to this kind of area of something that they would get animated about. But you might think this would be the moment, wouldn't it? This would be the moment when somebody would knock on the Prime Minister's door in Downing Street and say, Prime Minister, I've got to wake you up in the middle of the night to tell you that a boat with 230 people on it, 20 of them were children. It was 50 feet long. It's so big they can't even fit it on the front page of The Sun. They've had to use the sports page on the back to show the entirety of the photograph. I think that's a tabloid first, and good work to them for doing it as well. It's more people than would arrive on an EasyJet flight into an airport, and it's going to cost the taxpayer £25 million. You might think, with all of that information, the Prime Minister would be sort of dragged out of bed, essentially, to address the crisis in the House of Commons for an emergency. You know, it's got that bad, now we're going to act. But I mean, don't hold your breath on this, Sarah. I don't imagine we'll hear a squeak from Andy Burnham.
And in the meantime, of course, he's been here in the job for 2 or 3 weeks now, one of which he was on holiday whilst this national emergency is unfolding. And Reform have been very, very clear about what our policy is on this situation. We will get the Navy in the Channel. These boats will not reach our shores. What you're looking at there in that picture is a humanitarian crisis, and we are well within our rights to return that boat to the shores from which it left, which is France.
There's 20 kids on this boat as well, just to give it an even more dramatic and troubling bit of information. I mean, this is no place for, you know, these boats. I don't imagine the people that are, do you call it piloting a boat? I actually think you do somehow. I don't imagine these are nautical experts in any shape or form. People have got their legs hanging out, dipped into the water. Yes, it was calm across the channel because there's been no wind and the weather's been fantastic. So in that respect, they were lucky, but lucky is the word here. I mean, this is a dangerous crossing for all manner of reasons. It's no place for anyone, certainly no place for 20 children.
But look, I saw pictures there and I felt quite sickened by a picture of, 230 men, and one of them, or two of them, were holding up a very, very young child, young, a young baby. Now, look, you know, call me cynical, but that looked very, very sort of staged and rather propaganda-ish to me, because we know, we've been over to Calais, as have so many of your reporters, had a look at these camps, and we've seen that, you know, on one side of the road there's camps with women and children, and on the other side there's camps with many, many more young men, and they are the ones that are heading over to this country. The women and children, generally speaking, get left behind in Calais. We've seen it with our own eyes. You know, Reform have sent a delegation over, so we do know that we can talk from experience. So, you know, I feel very cynical about seeing something like that poor child, that poor baby being held up by these young men, almost as a trophy, saying, look, you know, you have to let us in.
Yeah. We, of course, are left in this perilous situation where the numbers are likely to go up. Andy Burnham, by the way, as you will have noticed, Sarah, is claiming some sort of victory on behalf of his party, saying, well, under Labour's initiatives, the number of people coming in has gone down. I think the reality is across the entirety of Europe, numbers have slightly gone down. It does this from time to time. I can't think of a single Labour initiative that would have seriously, that anyone with a straight face could argue it was because of what we did. What was it, the one-in, one-out policy? Seriously? They've done nothing on this, and I think that's a fair and objective assessment.
And the British people know that. We're not fools. You know, I knock on endless doors, particularly at the moment, and the number one issue is immigration. It's the way it is. Andy Burnham can dress it up that his £2 cap on bus fares is going to save the nation, or his 86 pence a week saving on fuel bills is going to save the nation. Look, the point is, this is the biggest national emergency crisis this country has been facing for decades, because it affects everything else. It affects the money in people's pockets. Yeah. And the Sun this morning has said this one boat will cost the taxpayer north of £25 million because of all the add-on costs of housing these people, feeding these people, etc. But look, the point is, you stop these boats, then suddenly that £25 million becomes available for other things, for helping the British. And let's move on to this tax situation which Andy Burnham is facing. Socialism is about taxing, it's about spending other people's money until the country goes bankrupt.
And that appears to be the problem here, because we've got projections from many economists saying that he's about to hike taxes by, and it's not an insignificant amount, £25 billion. I don't know what or who you have to tax to raise that kind of money. It is a sort of, as you rightly say, Sarah, it's a kind of socialist way of doing things. It's how it's always worked. You inevitably end up skint. You can only do it with other people's money because governments don't have their own money. Pensioners, we're told, could be in their sights. I mean, look, he's a man that's talked about fundamental change, not just a few tweaks here. He's done a few tweaks in the first couple of weeks, but he's talking about a change in the entire system. I think we should be worried.
We should be very worried. And as I say, socialism is about quashing all aspiration, all desire for growth, all desire for people to better themselves. Socialism is about controlling the population by keeping them down. And already with this Labour government's policies of increasing business national insurance rates, increasing minimum wages, and increasing the whole risk of employing young people, they have decimated the youth employment market. I have businesses talking to me in my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby on a daily basis saying they are no longer doing apprenticeship schemes. But, you know, not only that, they're reluctant to expand. That is real life, frontline stories, experiences of what the effect of socialism and tax is.
And on that point, Sarah, it's a profound one to finish on. Thank you, as ever, for your time. Have a wonderful day. It's going to be beautiful and sunny wherever you are in the UK. Sarah Pochin, Reform MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Thank you to her. Jane says, back towards... this is the solar eclipse thing. Have your back towards the sun, phone on selfie mode, hold the phone in front of you and record. Simple as a pimple, says Jane. In the 90s, it went dark and the birds went to sleep. Are birds that stupid that they actually went to sleep for what? Like, Christian says yes. I mean, it was a bit of short sleep, wasn't it? Because no sooner had they dropped off than it would have been light again, I would have assumed. I heard somebody talking about using a sieve. I think I was watching one of the breakfast TV shows. If you use a sieve, you have your back to the sun, you use a sieve, and then you put the sieve towards the sun and a piece of paper on a table in front of you, or however you want to place it, maybe on an easel, and it will reflect through the little gaps in the sieve the various shapes of the eclipse. That sounds like a lot of faff to me. My sieve is always in use. It's always sort of pasta-ridden and ready for a wash. So, and as soon as I've washed it, it's back in the drink again. So my sieve's probably not available. It sounds like a lot of faff. Pat's in Suffolk. Back to that issue of planes. Pat, what have you got for us? Morning.
Good morning, Ian. Yeah, I am a army brat, and I was born in Malaya, 1956.
Okay.
And when I returned to England as a 3-year-old boy, not an ancient boy, you know, when we weren't funny those days. But anyway, we were flying on a Comet, not the series that crashed, but the Comet 2s. Anyway, I don't know for a fact, but I was told this, so, you know, the noise of the jet engines was so loud. Don't forget, in those days, jet engines were all sort of very new and loud. And I refused to board. So what happened was my father asked the captain of the plane to shut the engines down while I boarded. So, you know, it's nothing new for youngsters to stop flights.
Yeah. So, and you are evidence of this, Pat.
Yeah. Well, I don't know for a fact, but I was always told this as a boy. You know,
that sounds about right. Those things were clunky old beasts back then, weren't they?
I said it's it's this BOAC, so it tells you how long. So I said it was the old Comets, the Comet 2s, you know, the Comet 1s were the ones that crashed, unfortunately. Yeah. But I said fun enough is Father got sent to Malaya on several occasions. In fact, at one stage he was actually with the Fed Army after they had gained their independence. But, but we had connections with Malaya. My grandfather was a rubber planter, and he spent the duration of the Japanese occupation in Changi jail. Not the film. That was the army.
Okay.
The actual civilians were kept in the actual prison itself. But
not a pleasant experience, I would imagine.
Well, basically, for the rest of his life, he had a lot of problems, health problems.
Of course. But, I get it. Listen, Pat, I've got to run. Thank you for that. Great call from Pat in Suffolk. Thank you to him. Over to you, 03444991000. Voice notes there as well on a variety of issues, whether it's boats or things in the sky, taxis going up, or what your high street looks like today compared to what it did look like about half an hour ago. Thoughts on all of that? Lines are open, 8:20. This is Talk.
crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in Crisis. Subscribe to The Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 8:25. Lots of comment coming in from you. Don in Chelmsford says, we were talking about the Shetland Isles and Lerwick, which is the sort of, I think I'm right in saying, as north as it gets. Where it's perpetually 14 degrees, it seems, in the summer months. Don says, according to Anne Cleeve's Shetland novels, it's cold, damp and foggy in winter. Thick jumpers and beards are obligatory. It stays light at night in the summer, but nevertheless a magical place, with no illegal boat migrants either. There you go. It probably is, I would imagine. There's, 6,000 people live there or something in Lerwick. Is that about right? You would stand a good chance of knowing everybody you bump into, wouldn't you, wherever you go. But I bet the pubs are fun. I'd like to think the community is incredible. And fishing, of course, central to everything. Now, Andy Burnham is confident he can stop the release of PC Andrew Harper's killers. That story has dominated this early release programme. Yesterday they were saying, well, we can't just not release them. Anyone else has been charged with manslaughter that's on early release. We'd have to also not release them either. Is that really the only option? Kieran Mullen, MP, Shadow Justice Minister and Conservative MP for Bexhill and Battle is with us. Kieran, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So that seems to be the government's position, certainly as I heard it last, although we're saying Mr Burnham is confident he can do something about this. But we certainly heard that yesterday the government can't simply pick one case and ignore the others. I'm not sure. Is that set in law?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, as you said, this is the case compared to yesterday, today. But a few days ago, we had this exact same thing. There was a briefing saying that we can't do it, then we can do it. And the people I feel for in all this are, of course, PC Harper's family, who are being pulled from pillar to post with various government people anonymously briefing through the press what they may or may not do about it. That must just be awful for them. And they know they've got an enormous amount of support amongst the public. I think almost 1 million people now have signed the petition saying that they shouldn't be released. Yeah. I mean, our petition has been clear from the start. So when this bill was first passed many months ago, we put down an amendment, an attempt to change the bill to say that we should be excluding rapists, paedophiles, killers, all these sorts of people from early release. And I think that's where the public will be on this issue. Why would any of these sorts of horrendous criminals being let of prison earlier, and we still think that that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be letting anybody that's killed somebody else out of prison earlier. The PC Harper case, quite rightly, has got the public's mood, the public's attention. There'll be families all over the country who have never been in the press, who don't have a public profile, whose relative was killed, who are going to be wondering what's happening with their person that killed their loved one. It's terrible.
It is terrible. Well, literally as we started speaking, we've just heard this news that has just broken, so this may not have caught up with even a man of your standing, Kieran. It is this: PC Andrew Harper's killers will now be kept in prison. Angela Rayner has confirmed this, the number 10 U-turn, after a solution was identified. I have no idea why it fell to Angela Rayner to release this news, but it did. She said that Justice Secretary Alex Norris will announce how the government will exempt the killers of PC Andrew Harper and other serious criminals from its early release scheme when Parliament returns in September. I think obviously we welcome that news, but it does say in that statement, Kieran, the killers of PC Andrew Harper and other serious criminals. So presumably they've had to include others that were earmarked for early release who no longer will be, because they can't simply pick and choose, which I struggle to believe, but that's it. So good news all round in one respect.
Yes, I mean, good news in principle, and this is the first time I think we've had any official statement to say that their position. So it must be quite hard for them to draw back from that. But again, we've still got weeks of the family not knowing what's going to happen. As I said, there will be families at home who've been the victim of serious violent criminals. Sure. They'll be spending the next few weeks thinking, well, are we going to be included? Are we not going to be included? And they've had months and months to think through how this bill is going to work. And what I found frustrating is they told us initially there was absolutely no way they could exempt rapists, for example, that if we exempt rapists, then the prisons would be overrun. It would be impossible to do. And now they could exempt rapists. And there are other people that aren't included. We had some victims, Kemi and I sat down with, did a press conference with these amazing women who spoke out about their experiences. It turns out one of those ladies, because the perpetrator in her case was convicted of an older sexual offence, indecent insult, we're not sure if they're going to be included or not. It's a complete mess. We're very clear we need to be building more prisons, deporting more foreign offenders, and if necessary, renting prison space abroad. That's the solution to this issue. And this government's got the whole weight of government behind it, £1 trillion of public spending and all those civil servants, and they can't seem to organise themselves to decide about a major policy that they've worked on for months and months and months.
It does seem extraordinary. And again, we're not North Korea, so we don't have governments dictating prison sentences and what happens in a courtroom. That's independent, and thank goodness for that. But with something like early release, which is a very specific, almost an emergency measure taking place, I would have thought that early release can only work literally on a pick and choose basis. You would simply look at individuals, so that person, regardless of whether they've technically committed the same offence. You might look at somebody and say, well, that person did this and that person did that. It's surely, in an emergency situation such as this, you would think it would fall to the government. I don't think there's anything in law that says if you release somebody early of this crime, then you have to release everybody early of this crime.
I mean, two things to say. One of the things that I found most frustrating about this is the government have successfully persuaded people that this is an emergency programme. Actually, one of the reasons why we fought it so hard is that this is a permanent, long-term change to our justice system. And so when they're thinking about this, they're thinking about, well, if we allow these people out, if we keep these people in, what's the consequences 5-10 years from now? And we're clear that on a permanent basis, these people should definitely not be getting out earlier. I think it's true to say that if you let you have to have a fair system. You have to have a system that you can explain and is fair to people. So if you just randomly pick a person because they're in the headlines, then that does potentially leave you open to legal challenge, because someone else can say, well, why wasn't I included? But that's why our solution is quite clear. We shouldn't be letting any of the people responsible for manslaughter, serious violent crimes, sexual offences, because at other times, it's true, my government, when we were last in, and the Labour government before then, there has been pressures on prison capacity, and then genuine early release schemes that are short term for that purpose tend to exclude, well, they've always excluded these sorts of people. So Labour have done two things differently. One, they made this a permanent change, and they didn't choose to exclude the sorts of offenders that your viewers and listeners would always think, of course, you can't let those people out of prison earlier.
Indeed, and I think it was only yesterday that the Conservatives identified the sort of recidivism problem as well, with potentially, I think, 90,000 more crimes committed as a result of people being released from jail, which sort of slightly highlights the rather counterproductive nature of this.
Yeah, I mean, prison works when people are recurrent and serious offenders. And when it comes to sexual offenders, offenders that we know pattern of offending often escalates. So they get worse and worse because it's a sexual compulsion. You know, how do you can't send someone on a course to stop them no longer being attracted to children and wanting to sexually assault women. These people need to be kept in prison for as long as we can keep them there. And that's what the victims were telling us, that they felt it wasn't safe, not just for them, some of whom the offenders they knew and were part of their families or their wider family network, but for other women that are on the streets. We saw that horrific case in the news this week where I think the Metropolitan Police have let themselves down very badly with that offender who was being pursued for various different offences. It wasn't pursued properly. He was suspected of being responsible for one murder. Turns out he was actually responsible for another murder, and they look back at that case. I mean, these are horrendous offenders. And actually what Labour said from the start when it came to this law of changing all this, they said that no serious offenders were going to be included. They said none of them were. The most serious offenders would be excluded. And we said at the time that was not true, and it's taken victims speaking out about their offenders to prove that it wasn't true.
Indeed. A word while you're with us, Kieran, just finally, this mega boat that arrived yesterday over there on the south coast. This was absolutely huge. Nothing has been seen like this before. 230 migrants on one boat. It's pretty much 50 feet long. The cost to the taxpayer, 25 million quid. The craft holds more than an EasyJet flight, which gives some people an idea of just how vast this is. If the Prime Minister ever needed a wake-up call, surely this is it.
Yeah. This all underlines the fact that what you need is a deterrent. You can do all the work you like in the Channel, persuading the French to do more or less, trying to discourage people. But at the end of the day, if people know that if they get here, they get to stay, they will keep finding new and different ways to get to this country, new tactics. The people smuggling gangs are going to carry on trying new things. We've already seen reports of them moving further down the coast. This point you've made about this mega boat, people have to know that if they come here, they don't get to stay, and you remove the incentive. And that's our clear policy. Take us out of the ECHR, make it clear if you come here illegally, you do not get to stay. You either get sent back to the country you came from or to another third country. The only country in the world that's tackled this problem successfully is Australia, and that's exactly what they did. They had a more than a 90% drop in the crossings when they said if you come here, you don't stay, and they enforced that. That's our clear policy, and the Labour need to wake up to the fact that that is the only way they're going to stop this problem, and the public expect them to do that.
Kieran, thank you for your time. Kieran Mullen, MP, Shadow Justice Minister for the Conservatives, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Jason in Market Harbour says, morning, Ian. It's like Groundhog Day with the migrant debate. Wake up and smell the roses. It's all being done on purpose. When you see the light, you'll start asking the right questions. Why does our government and elected leaders want to destroy our country? It's not rocket science. Stop all benefits to migrants, both legal and illegal. Stop free legal aid to migrants. Detain and deport all illegal migrants. 5 years mandatory prison sentence, and attain all personal assets of any landlord or business that provide homes and employment to illegal migrants. I hear that argument quite a lot. Interestingly, when we talk about is it being done by design, this argument takes you there, okay? It takes you to a place you wouldn't previously have looked at, because it's so unbelievable, it's so unfathomable, and in the absence of any other logic, why would somebody like Jason and others not gravitate to that belief? It has to be. Since 2018, which in relative terms is about half an hour ago, over 200,000 people have made the journey. This is just on boats, OK? Not forget the ones in the backs of lorries, those that have snuck in, overstayed their visas, students, whatever, whoever it happened to be. 200,000 people, nudging towards 250,000 people, have made that journey across the Channel. Now, have we got... I heard a bit of a debate yesterday about the benefits of migration, OK? Now, it's a silly question in many respects to ask, because you have to define what do you mean by migration. Is it the neurosurgeon that's flown over from Lagos to help operate on people's brains? Well, that's fine. Bring that man in and anyone else with those qualifications. The IT or AI experts that can take this country to become the leader of the new technological world. All of that, yeah, that's fine. We're not talking about, we know we're not talking about that. We're talking about these characters that come over on a boat. Is anyone going to tell me with a straight face that among those 200,000, and the smart money suggests most of those people are still here, what would be the net contribution, if you had to ask this question, the net contribution of those 200,000 people? to this country, to our economy? Look, we all know the answer, but that surely is a legit question. So even if you wanted to look at this just from the economics, nothing stacks up. It is bamboozling in the extreme. But you know what? I don't think it's by design. There's some inevitables going on, and it starts really, we spoke to the Italian ambassador yesterday, the former ambassador who is Italian, about this thing. There is particularly an African issue with migration and jobs and their economy feeding into Europe. Our political masters aren't clever enough to concoct any kind of deliberate plan. They really are. Because if they had concocted it, it would be a disaster. This thing is working quite well for the migrants. 0344 499 1000. Quick word from Paul in Brighton on the mega-dinghy. What have you got for us, Paul? Morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ian.
Hi.
Well, you mentioned that this mega-dinghy would be the wake-up call, but with respect, Ian, I think everyone's overlooking the wake-up calls that we've had previously, i.e., let's, for example, take that poor girl that was in the migrant hotel that was murdered a few months ago, stalked by one of the inmates, for want of a better term.
I think a receptionist or something, wasn't she?
Receptionist, correct. What about the wake-up call that we had recently on Brighton Beach, where 3 illegal migrants abused and raped a poor woman?
Yeah.
Also, in recent weeks, I don't know if this has been reported, you're aware of the reports, but in Brighton, we've had 3 further rapes on Brighton Beach in a 2-week period. Now, I'm not saying these are illegal migrants. Not all the names have been released of the supposed perpetrators, but one name has been released, and it certainly doesn't sound like John Smith to me.
Yeah.
I'm not being flippant here.
No, I know you're not. And of course, it's not as if we don't have, and you've just quoted some very tragic and horrific high-profile examples, and there are many more. You're absolutely bang on. They should be the wake-up calls. I mean, I just mentioned the overarching figure, Paul. You might have heard me say over 200,000 people. Is that in itself not a wake-up call? Are the various crimes, even if they are a small percentage, doesn't matter. We're asking the British public to play Russian roulette with 230 people. I don't struggle to understand that of 230 people on a boat, 200 of them, 210 of them are probably perfectly law-abiding people. But I just don't know which ones, and neither does anyone else.
No, correct. But if we drew a line and wrote down all their problems in this country, housing, criminality, problems on the high street, you mentioned earlier, vape shops, suspicious barber shops, releasing prisoners from prison, overcrowding prisons, the economy, etc., etc. Where else do I go with all this? There's the NHS,
endless
schools,
list,
places, schools, potholes in the roads.
Yeah.
You know, queuing at the Dartford Tunnel because there's too many cars on the road. Where does this all stem from? It stems from, if you drew a line and the top of the pyramid, it would be too many people for a small country. So I know you mentioned about the brain surgeon from Lagos, but I think, generally speaking, we don't need any more people in this country, regardless of their abilities.
I think you are right. And when people use the argument, that you hear the left counter that argument by going, oh, actually, if you look at the square meterage of this country and the amount, it's not about that. It's about our economy and what it can survive and withstand, what our infrastructure can survive and withstand. And it can't survive and withstand that amount of people. We don't need the barber shops and the vape shops or the car washes. Not required, frankly. Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. Great points from Paul in Brighton. 20 to 9. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. You are joining us as that breaking news that PC Andrew Harper's killers will be kept in prison. Angela Rayner has confirmed this. I have no idea why it fell to the Housing Department to release this, but nonetheless, she's a senior minister in this government. Number 10's U-turn suggests a solution has been identified. It seems to me that the solution is that they... I think I'm right. I think I've got this right. They are legally obliged to, because they talked about other dangerous or perpetrators that have committed similar crimes, will also be kept in prison. So they can't just select one group of people who've been charged with a certain offence, in this case manslaughter, and not include the others. So if you release one group, you've got to release all of them. I don't know why. Surely early release by definition is on a case-by-case basis, I would have thought. Peter Blexley joins us, former Met detective, big regular on the programme. Peter, good morning to you. Obviously, this is welcome news. There's obviously a few caveats in there which we've yet to hear too much about. But broadly speaking, thank goodness for common sense. And why did it take this long?
Well, yes, I suppose we can take some crumbs of comfort from this news. But the absolute reality is these offenders, all three of them, including the driver who got 16 years, as opposed to these two who got 13 years, were handed down lamentably lenient, pathetic sentences. They should have got a lot longer, and then we wouldn't have been having this debate raging for the last couple of weeks. But unfortunately, we're in the position that is put in front of us, and at least the government have finally, I think probably at the expense of many, many other people convicted of manslaughter who now will not be subject to early release. But the government had to do something. The strength of public opinion was overwhelming.
Do we know what this early release looks like on paper? I've never really considered what the timeline is on this. I mean, is it early release because you're released 3 months earlier than you would have been? Is it early release because you're being released a couple of years before you should have been? Do we know any details on that, Peter?
Once upon a time, not so many years ago, people would serve 2/3 of their sentences, generally speaking, before they would become eligible for parole. And if they went in front of a parole board, then they deemed them as safe to go back into the public, onto the streets, then they'd be released. Then, of course, that's been watered down. Then it became half, and now under the Sentencing Act, which comes into force in September, you can be released after as little as 40% of your sentence or 30%. So there has been a gradual weakening of the strength of our criminal justice system now that it's become almost farcical. But of course, the government will tell you that's very necessary because of the prison overcrowding situation, which is dire, unfortunately.
It really is. No real solution in sight, it seems. And we just spoke to the Conservative shadow Justice Minister, Peter, who said that this was not a temporary initiative, the early release, but a permanent one. So we are forever, at least for the foreseeable, going to be in this same dubious and suspicious place where people who've done very bad things are let out of jail early.
Yes, it's on the statute book. It's law. So in that regard, it will be with us until such time as we get a government that's got a spine that is courageous enough to repeal the Act and replace it with something whereby the sentences that people get will be the sentences that people serve. And I think that's what the public is craving, because it's just farcical, the situation at the moment. When somebody stands in front of a judge who asks them to stand up and hands down the sentence, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the amount of time that they will actually spend behind bars. It really is beyond a joke. And somebody really needs to grip this. But of course, that's only going to be done when we've got sufficient prison space to lock people up for the sentences they deserve. Or perhaps we have a different type of government, say, for example, Reform, and their announcement yesterday to send people to El Salvador, foreign prisoners, if they can't be returned to their home country, if something like that ever came to pass. We need a revolution in the criminal justice system, all of it, from policing at the front line through to the CPS, through to the courts, the prisons and probation. Because quite frankly, none of it is operating like it should do.
Bang on, Peter. Thank you. We'll speak again very, very soon. In fact, is Peter in with us tomorrow? He possibly is. I think so. Right here on Talk. Peter Blexley, former Met detective. Thank you to him. In response to that breaking news, PC Andrew Harper's killers will be kept in prison. Angela Rayner has confirmed this. It's a number 10 U-turn after a solution was identified. That is the direct quote from Rayner's office. A solution has been identified, which sounds like people who've also committed manslaughter will also be kept in jail, because you can't apparently just select one or two cases and not the others. I have no idea how that works, because the early release programme is, as I see it, a government decision as distinct from a court decision, which is where sentencing is obviously originally happens, and governments don't get involved in that. So this is sort of meant to be emergency measures. There is, I'm sure, an explanation, don't know what it is. Ivor in Chelmsford said, tell me what's wrong with this plan. This is back to the small boats, or now big boats, bloody big boats as well. Tell me what's wrong with this, says Ivor. As soon as the dinghy rocks up, the driver is arrested, charged with a criminal offence and imprisoned for a couple of years. What's more, the dinghy is confiscated, deflated and stored. Yes, there are still the passengers to be processed, but if the gang's drivers are collared, the traffic will soon stop. You don't hear much about that, do you? Who's the bloke running or driving the dinghy? Now, when there were just 7 of them in these things, and if you go back to, as I mentioned, the figures a little earlier, you haven't got to go back that far to realise that it was 2018 when you'd have, in fact, in 2018, 299 people in the year crossed the channel. And that steadily went up and up and up and up, and then we got to 2022, where nearly 46,000 suddenly arrived. Something happened at that time, and it's steadily gone in similar directions, down to 29,000 in 2023. At the moment, it's 15,000 this early in August. Labour are claiming that as a victory. What about the people the person that pilots the boat, for God's sake? Isn't that the first person you'd nab? Surely, you might think so. Or do they just drop off, you know, like a kind of, yeah, like a park and ride? Is that how that is that how it works? Does he just do a U-turn and go, see you later, and then come back with another lot? I mean, surely they don't allow that to happen, although in the world of insanity we currently live in, I wouldn't be surprised. It's 10 to 9. Let's get some sports news.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
And joining us, Dan King, Chelsea correspondent over there at The Sun. Dan, morning to you.
Morning.
FIFA not escaping the headlines again. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that the heads of 3 of the confederations, CONCACAF, which is Central and Northern America, Europe and Asia, have done an open letter basically calling on Infantino again to resign, saying there's no way back for you. And behind the scenes, we're also told that those 3 confederations are pressing ahead with looking at plans to run their own competitions if FIFA don't bow to their demands, because UEFA made certain demands. They said, look, our nations and clubs will boycott your competitions until certain things happen, and those related to the abandonment of these proposals to sell off the World Cup and so on. But they also involved a change in leadership, and specifically the removal of Infantino as president. But at the moment, he is clinging on by his fingertips.
Clinging on indeed. And there is a rather grim stat, isn't there, as I understand it, Dan? We can look at all the big countries that are, you know, right at the forefront of football prowess and success, and I'm talking about mostly European countries. I think that's a fair assessment, whether you're looking at even us and France, Germany, Spain, Italy, and all the rest of it. Not all of those countries have had great years of late, but you take the point. All of those people very vocal about it, all the different football associations very vocal about it, but of course, for every one of us lot over the continent of Europe, there's a lot of African nations, a lot of Middle East nations that don't have this same view, and there's more of them than there are of us.
But it's also, and you also have to remember that, don't forget that Mexico and Argentina, the 3-time world champions, have also come out in favour of Infantino. So it's not quite as a divide as that, but it's always been the case, not just with FIFA, but also with any confederation, that presidents rule by getting enough votes from their member associations. And if you are handing out big sums of money for football development to African country, Asian country, wherever it may be, then you're likely to garner their vote. And I mean, I don't know whether this will be the kiss of death from or not, but the fact that Mr. Trump has now come out in favour of Infantino, maybe that will actually be a destabilising thing for him. But whether you're Trump or whether you're Infantino, you stay in power as long as there are people around in whose interest it is for you to stay in power. And Infantino will be there as long until we reach a tipping point where those people who've been propping him up decide, do you know what? This guy is now more trouble than he's worth. Whether that's going to arrive this week, whether it's going to arrive before the start of next month's Under-20 Women's World Cup, we don't know. But these people only survive in power as long as the people who've got vested interests let them. So let's see whether it'll happen or not.
Yeah, and no surprise to me that Argentina would be backing this man. Just saying. Let's look at this Netflix documentary. A man who I would consider, as a Chelsea fan, to have a certain amount of hero status over there at the bridge. Jose Mourinho. It's a new Netflix documentary that is really painting a picture of a sort of slightly sad man consumed by football. Would you share that assessment? What are you making of this?
Well, yes, I think that the very successful managers, and whatever you think of his more recent history, Mourinho is one of the most successful managers of the modern era, full stop.
Yeah. You mean generally or of Chelsea?
Well, no, generally. He's won leagues and Champions Leagues, different Champions Leagues all over the place. With both with Inter Milan and with don't forget Porto, winning the Champions League with Porto.
Porto, yeah.
That's mental. Yeah. Let's face it.
Yeah, how did that happen? You forget about that, don't
well,
you?
Exactly. So he's a great manager, but I think all these guys, and they're all very different personalities, but what they share, Ferguson, Guardiola, Conte, another one of your ex-Chelsea managers, you can't be a success at the very top level unless you are absolutely obsessed with it, unless it is your entire life, and that perhaps you devote almost too much of yourself to it. And I think what's been sad for Chelsea fans, perhaps in particular over recent years, is to see him being not so successful and some of the kind of spikiness that he had, which forged that kind of siege mentality at Stamford Bridge and really helped them become winners. That's become almost the kind of dominant side of his personality, and that there's a feeling that he's been left behind as a coach now, and that he's relying more on his almost kind of shock tactics than anything else. But he's got another chance at Real Madrid, so let's see how he handles that. But I think it's slightly sad, but it's quite a lonely world whether you're a top athlete or a top
100%,
coach.
yeah, 100%.
It has to be your life, otherwise you're not successful.
When we're watching football, we're watching our team, and of course it's not been a good run, or it's not a particularly good game. Obviously, there's insults thrown out, and
Cambridge Barnet on Saturday. I can tell you that was one. That was not a very good game.
Cambridge Barnet. Wow, there's a fixture. Were you there?
Yeah, Carabao Cup first round.
Of course. West Ham had a win though, didn't they, on Saturday? Every cloud and all that. I look at Chelsea. Funny enough, I was in a clothes shop yesterday and I had a conversation with the bloke in the shop who was a Brighton manager, who he said, "Who do you support?" And I said, "Chelsea." And he went, "Oh, I hate Chelsea with a passion. Hate Chelsea." And I thought, all right, mate, steady on. He's trying to sell me a pair of jeans, this fella. He's not doing very well. Anyway, and I was looking back at Chelsea, and it's always been a bit checkered over the last few years. And, this last season was horrible. And, there was a lot of sort of mid-table dalliances, as you remember, of course. And then, it finished a little better than some thought. Can Chelsea pull it straight this season? Is there anything they're going to pull out the bag? We've only got 20 seconds on this, if we could, Dan. Can they make it work?
They can. I think they need to sell some more players because their squad is too big.
True.
But I think there have been some encouraging signs on the pre-season tour, others not so encouraging. But if you look at Manchester United last season, where they only played 40 matches, so that's their 38 league games plus 2 cup games.
Yep.
Chelsea not in Europe. Alonso will have time on the training ground every week to drill in what he wants from them. They've got the squad. They should have the squad to make a real good challenge for the Champions League places. Not for the league, I don't think, but for the Champions League places, definitely.
Yeah, and it's always worth remembering, a little factoid for Chelsea fans who are moaning about Alonso and others, that Glenn Hoddle was once our manager. So there you go. Listen, great to have you on, Dan. Thank you. Dan King, Chelsea correspondent over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. News at 9 coming next.
sex basis on biological sex.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot have people going into a women's space, which is for women only, who is not a biological woman.
I was wondering whether that interview was conducted on April Fool's Day, because I think it was a new low in the sort of...
A new low for low?
A new low for low, because, I mean, just the absurdity of not being able to ask a very basic question about the monarch of our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good morning. It is Talk Breakfast. Welcome along. It's a Tuesday. It's is it the 11th? I think it is, of August. Summertime well and truly with us. A heat wave is on its way for most parts of the country. Not everywhere, of course. It's Collins in for Kyle on Talk Breakfast. So much to get through. Deconstructing the rather dubious and strange and the nonsense news agenda that seems to fall upon us on a daily basis. A confusing picture of unfathomable decisions and events. Groundhog Day just had some booster rockets added to it, courtesy of the world's busiest rubber dinghy. 230 people crossing the channel yesterday on one boat. The total cost to you, the taxpayer, £25 million. There is no longer a small boat crisis. These boats look like something the Royal Navy might have used to go into battle with. How bad do the visuals at least have to get before the Prime Minister says, I think we need to do something about this? We'll talk more about that and your comments along the way as well. Also, Andy Burnham vowing to save our high streets that's been dominated by vape shops, bookies and rogue businesses. High streets ain't what they used to be. They used to not only be places of retail, of course, but community hubs for locals and families for a nice, relaxing afternoon shop. But look at them now. They are a mess. How bad is your local high street? And can Andy Burnham save it? This is the same man, by the way. There's not a saviour of the economy, because we understand he's going to raise taxes by £25 billion to fund his spending pledges. This is a sinister warning from the UK's top economists. A socialist MP raising taxes? Surely not. Who'd have thought it? We hear that pensioners could be in his sights. And the flight that had to be cancelled because a kid wouldn't put its seatbelt on. They didn't just remove the one family, they grounded the whole flight due to the timetable of takeoff. It's never a comfortable moment when someone goes rogue at 30,000 feet, but if you've been there, the bad and the bonkers behaviour you've seen up in the air, we're all ears at this end. Same number, and you can message 87222. Interesting one from Rach in Wales. He says, morning in, at the risk of sounding controversial, I have a question. Is nothing being done about illegals because it's predominantly men arriving in boats? Is there an apathy for men in this country because the threat is not against them, but against women and girls? It's not the general public who are at threat, it's women and girls. The attitude towards women's safety is continually raising its ugly head, and this is just one example. Yeah, and I say this, I mean, again, in the absence of another explanation, it's one of many strands that could be introduced on this. We spoke a little about this yesterday, but I bring this up quite often. Look, yesterday, 230 migrants on a boat. I have no trouble in understanding that 220 of them, maybe 225 of the 230, are perfectly reasonable people that thought, well, I currently live in Eritrea, it's a bit rubbish there, I quite fancy the UK, and I'm sure they're not going to harm anyone or do anything illegal. But 5 or 10 might. And we don't know which 5 or 10. So we're being asked to play a sort of Russian, a crude and dangerous Russian roulette with the lives of British people, and as Rach in Wales identifies, mostly women. We're playing Russian roulette in that respect. And again, what does it take for Andy Burnham to go, now I can see the problem? You might think a boat this big is 50 feet long, by the way. It's as big as an EasyJet aircraft and as busy. You might think that would be the point when even somebody with a kind of a left-wing view of immigration would look at the story and say, yeah, that's probably now the tipping point. But actually, there's been many tipping points before then. I could talk about the nearly 250,000 people since 2018 that have made their way illegally into this country. That would be the headline itself. The point that Rach just made, the amount of assaults, it may well, whether it's a smaller number, as a percentage and all, we get that, we all understand that. But surely there's a point when you say, how many people have to go to jail? People who arrived in small boats before we say, look, given we don't know who these people are, and so often not even where they came from, that might be the tipping point. The fact that a percentage are often from Iran, a country that we are sort of at war with, tacitly or otherwise, that might be coming from the country that is the greatest exporter of state terrorism. That might be the tipping point. There's loads of them out there. It's not hard to see the problem. But if you are a government minister, Conservative, and now Labour, where I genuinely think it's worse, then I don't think you do see it. I think you see something else before you see any of those headlines. Isabel Oakeshott is with us, Talk's international editor. Isabel, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, I'm absolutely fascinated by how this problem is evolving. I mean, it's a real crisis. And I heard you asking earlier on, one of our contributors was saying, well, why don't they just arrest the people in charge of the boat? And actually, I know a lot about this. I won't be telling you all about it today, but it is certainly something they're trying to do. But as always, the smugglers are kind of more than one step ahead of the authorities on this. And let's just say that there are multiple people, in quotes, in charge of these vessels. Most of them don't have even the most basic understanding of how the boats work. which is why they routinely needs to be rescued. And there are various disguises worn to make it very difficult to identify for the authorities who is actually in any position of authority on the vessel. It is highly organised, this whole system, and we routinely see pictures of absolute chaos of people fighting to get on the boats, and in that moment it is chaotic. But make no mistake, the smugglers know exactly who is on board, by which I mean they don't know the background of each of these individuals, but they certainly know who is supposed to be on which boat and whether or not they've paid, whether in cash or in services promised at the other end. So it's not chaotic at all, apart from at that point of boarding. And in terms of who's in charge, that is also highly organised and very, very well designed to make it as difficult for the authorities as possible when they're picking up these boats. Forget the French helping us. I mean, they've got a ton of information that they're not bothering using. But when our lot come to that midway point and pick up the dinghies and transfer the passengers onto border force boats, it's almost impossible for them often to tell who is who.
So the person that's, I think the phrase is piloting the boat, but so that person, as it comes into sort of the shores of Dover, for example, does that person jump out the driver's seat and just sort of sit there like they're one of the many migrants and nobody can identify that person? And does that person also claim asylum?
So the answer to the question is probably yes and yes. So yeah, they look like all the rest of them. And remember, to the untrained eye, British people don't necessarily see quite as many distinctive features. When you're seeing a mass of people together, it's pretty hard to pick people out. And they're very careful to disguise distinguishing features. Although it is possible to notice things like tattoos and quite other distinctive markings if you're doing your job properly. And every border rescue boat that goes to meet these inflatables does actually have a cameraman on board. They have somebody whose sole job it is to actually take the footage so that the authorities can try to recognise patterns here. But the smugglers are smart, they're clever, and they're constantly evolving how they do things. Suffice to say that there's more than one person involved in the actual navigation at different stages.
Sure.
And this gets swapped around, and not everybody makes it all the way to Dover. And I strongly suspect that, of course, somebody has to get the boat to the point where there's a pickup. And then they can't just sort of go back again immediately. But remember that we don't detain people for more than 24, but we don't really detain them at all.
Yeah.
So on arrival, after they've been processed, that person who has made the final leg of the journey is free to just go back to France.
So they can, but presumably not in the same boat, which would be...
No, because a boat will then have been put into a pound.
Yes.
The boat will have been taken off and it goes into a yard. We know exactly where they are. And they actually destroy the boats now. I think up until fairly recently, as I understand it, they were actually sort of, the police were auctioning off the engines. And the engine on these boats is the most expensive and valuable bit of kit.
Yeah.
And they were being auctioned off. But that, I think, got stopped because it was discovered that they were, one way or another, finding their way back to northern France. So that doesn't happen anymore, as I understand it. I'm not actually an expert on this particular bit of the process, but I think those boats all get destroyed now along with their engines.
Yes.
So no, I don't think they'll go back by boat. And you'd like to think there was a process that stopped them going back to France.
You would like to think so. And again, it comes back to, I mean, this is well-worn stuff that we've discussed so many times, Isabel, but, on this particular occasion, because it's the biggest one we've seen, a 50-foot long boat with, the capability of holding more people than an EasyJet flight. You might have thought somebody had seen this thing at the other end when it left. I mean, it's pretty big. I don't know how you can transport it even before it's inflated. It must be, it's not the sort of thing that arrives in one of those little Amazon boxes at your front door. It would require quite some bit of kit to blow the thing up. I doubt whether they did that with their own lips. So again, it just feeds into that curious and incredulous situation of how did nobody spot this?
Well, of course they spotted it.
Yeah.
You know, they know exactly where these departure points are. They're pretty much always out in force ahead of a significant departure, and that's for a departure of 80 people, not 230.
Yep.
So I'm certain the French authorities, they will have had their spotter plane above, and they will have had multiple search and rescue vessels on the beach, search and rescue teams ready to go. They will have had search and rescue in the water around that launch. But what they do is facilitate it.
Yeah.
And this is what I find so hard to understand. And I know so many of our listeners are utterly exasperated and bewildered by. How is it that we continue giving the French any money at all?
Why would wouldn't you just stop the checks if you were the British government? You say, well, look, whatever we're paying you for is clearly not working.
They're literally facilitating it.
Yeah.
And there are very simple things that could be done. And I've spoken about this time and again. The whole setup relies very heavily on free public transport around the coast. If the French police just stopped allowing groups of migrants to travel for free from one departure point to the other, then it all becomes much more difficult, because although the distances aren't huge by road or by train, they are very long way on foot.
Sure.
You are talking 10s, 20s, 30s, 40 miles. And it then becomes logistically much more difficult, because the smugglers quite often change departure points at fairly short notice. That works if you can just hop on a bus to the next sort of nearest location. It doesn't work if you've got to walk 20 miles with bad shoes. So again, that is such a simple thing that our authorities could just demand of the French. Look, guys, okay, we'll carry on working with you, and we'll carry on giving you British taxpayers money, but for goodness sake, stop the free transport. That's a simple thing. It's not a difficult ask. You could implement that this afternoon. Literally this afternoon, the French police could do that. The French government could do that. And it would make a massive difference.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see that in real time, those numbers alter as a result of something rather simple about that. Isabel, just a final point on this. Do you have any intel on, I mean, Reform, of course, is talking about using the Royal Navy. They've been criticised for this by the good and the great, and particularly Labour, saying, well, look, firstly, the Royal Navy don't really have any maritime infrastructure in any way that would alleviate this problem. It can't work. That seems to be I mean, people are often great at saying it can't work without explaining why they think it can't work, but have Reform explain how it would work.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons we are where we are, because the left and critics of any party don't even necessarily need to be on the left. Whenever anybody comes up with any solution to this scheme, they all start saying, oh no, it's impossible, don't be so stupid, have you looked at this law, have you looked at that law? What is needed to solve this is, on the British side, is political will and determination. Of course, that doesn't get you everywhere. Actually, just wanting to solve the problem doesn't necessarily mean you do solve the problem, but it's a pretty good starting point, and we actually haven't been in that position since Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme, much derided, which is the right sort of idea, but poorly executed. So I don't really have time for people that carp from the sidelines, from positions of zero knowledge about the mechanics of this whole racket. And surprisingly few people understand from the inside how this works. It's not enough to go to Calais and just hang around the beach and take photographs of people leaving. To understand it, to cast right back to the beginning of this last period of the journeys that have begun in sub-Saharan Africa, in many cases, involves an awful lot more work than just standing on a beach and taking photographs, though that's also great and valuable stuff to do. And it certainly involves more work than going, as Andy Burnham did, down to Dover and standing next to a dinghy. So how about we listen to people who've actually really properly tracked what is the process from A to B, A being northern France, B being Britain, and start implementing the simplest solutions to begin with before we get too fancy about what else we can do. This is a layered approach. Of course, stopping the boats is the ultimate thing. You know, they should be turned back, returned, or else the minute people get to the UK, this is something we 100% can do. We don't need anyone else's cooperation to detain at that point. Detain. You don't just let people melt into the community. But how about we also pretty much declare war, I don't mean military war, on the French? How about we get tough with them, to put it another way, and say, listen, not a penny more. And by the way, we want some of our money back until you start doing the basics.
And it all sounds fair enough. Of course, fair enough, logic and common sense do tend to go out of the window once they reach the centre point of power, i.e. Westminster and Downing Street. Very briefly, if we could, Isabel, that breaking news in the last half an hour, PC Andrew Harper's killers will be kept in prison. This was announced by Angela Rayner. Quite why it fell to the Housing Secretary, I've no idea, but I guess summer recess and all the rest of it, that's fine. A U-turn was made after a solution was identified. Naturally, we welcome this news. I sense there are a few caveats in there as well about other people who won't be released.
I love the way they put this, after a solution was identified, like ... not letting him out.
Yes,
I mean, it's not really a complicated one, that
we
one,
decided
is it?
not to open the door of the prison.
Yeah, that's my kind of solution here.
Yeah.
It's a really simple one. This is the right thing to do, and if it means that a bunch of other people who've committed the same category of crime also can't be let out earlier, well, yay. You know, sorry for them that they've suddenly thought they were going to get early release and they're not. But the British voter, the taxpayer, members of the public will be very glad that people are having to serve a bit more of the sentences that they were originally given. It's just become ridiculous, hasn't it? When people get a big number of a sentence, and it was never big enough in the first place on this one, and then it ends up being a fraction. You know, not 2/3, as Peter Blexley was saying, used to be the case, but maybe half or less than half. I don't think that is where people's minds are at, where the voters' minds are at, and there's got to be other solutions to our overcrowded jail crisis. We've talked about this all week, haven't we? Than just opening the doors. There's got to be, in the words of this government, a solution, another solution found.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very obvious stuff in life. People coming over the channel on a rubber boat and highly dangerous criminals being kept inside, not outside. All very simple stuff. You might think at this point in the 21st century we'd have got this kind of stuff worked out. Apparently not. It's all too tricky. Listen, Isabel, thank you as ever. Have a great day. Isabel Oakeshott with us here on Talk. Let's get some comment on the boat crossings. Kate's in Shoreham. Morning, Kate. What have you got for us?
Oh, hello. Thank you, Ian. Well, what I would like to know, they're saying that the number of boats are down. But how about the number of illegal immigrants? Because if the boats are now 4 or 5 times bigger, carrying 4 or 5 times the amount of people, then I'd like to know what the figures are year on year for July, because they're celebrating the fact the boats are down, but that doesn't mean to say the number of people in the boat.
That's very true. I think across Europe, and of course, naturally, Southern Europe takes the hit first because that's where people come in from. Generally speaking, whether in Greece, Italy, Spain, obvious areas where people enter the continent, as it were, people are down in coming over.
Right.
So that would obviously feed through. The grim news, however, Kate, is that it looks as if that's likely to be very temporary, based on some really interesting projections about what is happening in Africa with employment and young people and future. There's likely to be, you know, what one man told us yesterday, 2 million displaced Africans over the coming years that will want somewhere to go.
Well, my boyfriend and I, we were looking at the figures, and if it's over 40,000 per person, illegal immigrant, a year. That's over £9 million for that one boat that came in.
Yes.
It's outrageous, isn't it?
Well, that particular boat apparently is 25 million in tax because it's 106,000 per person when you factor in the legal bills. So it's even worse than you'd assessed. I mean, how grim is this?
I know, and they're just pouring in. I mean, I just can't believe that they're not seeing this as an emergency.
Yeah, well, I don't know what constitutes an emergency if this doesn't, but we live in very peculiar smoke and mirrors times, Kate, but thank you for that, Kate in Shoreham. 9:25, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle. For the remainder of this week, this is Talk.
Should council staff who don't follow the law be sacked, and should councillors who urge them not to lose their roles and lose the whip?
Well, I don't know. Is the answer?
Why don't you know?
It would depend.
I know the answer to that.
It would depend on the circumstances.
No, it wouldn't.
Before I start calling for
if you urge people to break the law, you shouldn't be in public office.
I think it would depend on the manner in which that was done and the circumstances.
Why?
My overall point is that they need to abide by the code.
So if they need to abide by the code and they don't, they'd be breaking the law and urging someone else to break the law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There's a lot to get through in this last half an hour of the breakfast show. Julie Hartley-Brewer is here at 10 this morning. Paul in Southend says, I find it extraordinary that any serious politician thinks France is going to stand by while a British warship unloads hundreds of immigrants that they've worked hard to get rid of. There's something in that. Andy makes this point, reference small boats. The vessel should be registered, insured, have a qualified captain and first officer. Communication, seaworthiness certificate, have filed a plan, etc. Carrying passengers without these are criminal offences in France and the UK. Why are the French ignoring their own rules? If they wanted to, the UK could take the French to court for this, but they won't. Yes, if I rocked up, if I went down to Folkestone for the weekend and took a massive rubber dinghy with me, bought it off that fella with the beach hut, Maybe it might have been a big dinghy with a Donald Duck front to it or something, and stuck 60 people on the back and started mooching around, like looking as if I was going outwards, then I reckon a police boat would arrive and probably nab me. Go, what are you doing, mate? You can't do that you can't do that. There's 60 people on the back. You're a menace. You're under arrest for health and safety breach and all manner of maritime rules. I would think that might happen. Let's get a voice note on the big boats. This comes from Steve. Morning, Steve.
Morning, Ian. It's Steve from Manchester. Yeah, I'm listening to Andy Burnham's speech he did at Dover, saying that the boat crossings are down by 50%. Yeah, they're at the same level they were when the Tories were in power, and then they shot up when Labour took over, and now they're back down to the same level. But he's talking about opening safe routes for these people to come across. Does he not realise that the reason why these people come across is because they don't want to come here via the safe routes, because that means they would have to have a job, they would have to pay taxes, and these people don't want to do that. They just want to come here, claim as much benefits as they can, and sponge off the black market. It's ridiculous, it is, mate. Anyway, great show. Keep up the good work.
Good man, Steve. Thank you. Bright and sunny Manchester. That's Steve. Let's just get an update on the story of PC Andrew Harper's killers, who will be now kept in prison. This was announced by Angela Rayner's department, curiously. She is, of course, not the minister in charge, but I guess holidays and all the rest of it. She's a senior cabinet member. Number 10, U-turned after a solution was identified. And as Isabel just said, that solution being not to let them out of jail. Brilliant. Andy Burnham has now commented on this. The Prime Minister said he is increasingly confident that work to increase space in the prison system will allow us to reduce the number of people released early and, in the case of the most serious offenders like those convicted of killing Andrew Harper, prevent their early release altogether. That's the latest from Number 10. Ryan Saby is also with us, Deputy Political Editor over there at The Sun. Ryan, morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Massively impressed by the Sun splash this morning, not least because of the, as ever, everything the way it's worded and the way the story is told. But I don't know how often this happens when a front page picture gets splashed across the back page as well, to be able to illuminate the point of the length of this boat that crossed the channel. It's a essentially 50-foot mega-dinghy. And the Sun worked out, well, to do this justice, we'll move on to the sports pages as well.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. We often have on big events during the World Cup and sort of big showbiz events. We'll have it across the front and back. But in terms of just showing the magnitude of how big the small boats, or should I say the big boats, have got, we've had to show the picture running into the sports pages. So it just shows you, how ridiculous this situation has become, where boats, just a few years ago were bringing over 30, 40, 50 people. It's now getting into sort of, well over 100, 200 people. And, you could carry those people on a jet coming from France. So it's totally out of control.
It is completely out of control. And every time, we all sound like stuck records here in many respects, because we're all equally as incredulous over this. I mean, what is happening is, the dictionary definition of the word unbelievable, it really is that you could, if you were talking to a group of people in a pub in the, even in 2008 or something, about what's happening here. We know, people often legged it in the backs of lorries, but the audacious nature of these crossings, and we've been seeing regularly, 700, 1,000 a day when the weather's good. I mean, it's quite off the scale in terms, if this was a different era, people would assume you were making the story up, that 230 blokes, mostly blokes, jumped on a rubber boat and came in uninvited, without any paperwork, to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, you look at the circumstances around it, and I believe that boat or other boats who have been making that journey in recent days have actually been stopping at different points along the French coast to actually pick people up. These people smugglers will stop at nothing to ensure they get their money and bring as many people over as they can. But it wasn't that long ago where we had experts talking about the small boats carrying 60 or 70 people, how dangerous that was. On this situation, these boats, I mean, Keir Starmer, when he was in power, was all about trying to actually get to these boats at source and actually try and sort of destroy the sort of production of them. That seems to have been totally blown out of the water. How are these boats being made of this size, and how they are not being detected along the French coast? And bear in mind, Ian, of course, that it's £1 billion, give or take, that we'll be paying the French from, over deals over 6 or 7 years to try and stop this. I think when, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, and Andy Burnham, they really need to sort of go over to Paris and sort of bang some heads together on this, because we look at these pictures and, as I say, it's getting totally out of control.
Well, you would think, I think Isabel made the point, and certainly a few others too, if nothing else, then the Prime Minister would say to France, look, we're not going to give you any more money, because clearly whatever we were giving it to you for is not demonstrably, objectively, evidently, it's not working.
Yeah, it was interesting, actually. Last week we had a government minister who said that ministers and trading standards had been into places like nail bars and sort of Turkish barbers, saying that they are cracking down, and 2,000 people over the last couple of years had actually been sent back. The government minister that sends a message that people will be sent back to France. Well, let's have a look at the numbers. I think over last year we had 40,000 people come over. Just since Andy Burnham's come into number 10, we've had 2,000. So it does send a message to people trying to come over. You've got a good chance of staying. There's thousands and thousands of people who've come over here since, is it 2018, 2019, when these small boats started coming across the channel. You've got a pretty good chance of staying and, claiming, benefits and asylum, going through the process. And you might not be sent back. You can disappear into the black market, the black economy. And you have a good chance of earning a living and sort of disappearing. So, it does send a message, come over.
Well, indeed. We were just crunching the numbers a little earlier on this, Ryan. Over 200,000. It will be approaching that next totemic figure of 250,000. Potentially by the end of the year, we'll be in that sort of territory. In the last 8 years, I mean, this is a huge number. We don't ever see any data about how many of those people have been returned, how many of those people are still being processed, how many disappeared into the black market. I don't even know whether there's a database kept on this. When you go to the Four Seasons or the Holiday Inn or wherever the hell it is you are transported to from Dover, does anybody do a regular check? Is there a register every day? Well, we had 38 people staying here this morning. There's only 35 today. I mean, do they even do that? We don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah, I'd have to speak to Home Office people, but I think that information, probably could be a little bit more transparent. Now, government ministers last week were saying the number of visits to these nail bars, the number of visits to these Turkish barbers and these rogue operators is actually up, and the number of people arrested is actually up. But let's have a look at how many people were convicted. Let's have a look at the total number of people who've been sent back, or is it just that people are totally stuck in the system? So I think the harsh reality, Andy Burnham he returned yesterday from his holiday, and he walks into, two big storms, whether it's this on small boats or it's on the controversy over the PC Andrew Harper and the release of his 2 killers. So he's got a lot to get to grips with on his first or second day back.
It's interesting that the Prime Minister has, as you heard, as you were coming on there, Ryan, made a statement on the killers of Andrew Harper who are not going to be released now on the early release. I think from what I can gather, what they've had to do is anyone else who was due to be released who'd been convicted of manslaughter will also not be released. I think they have to, I don't know why, but they have to look for parity across the system, apparently. So we've had a statement from Andy Burnham on something as serious as that, but we will never get I bet we hear nothing from him about this massive boat that's just arrived at Dover.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. He will be I believe he's up in Derbyshire today on part of his summer tour, and I think he'll be speaking to some journalists up there. And I guess, knowing my political colleagues, journalists will be asking him about both the release of and you know, or the non-release of Andrew Harper's killers, and also this incident in the Channel in the past 24 hours. So he will be put on you know, under the spotlight on that. But I think when it comes to PC Andrew Harper and the early release scheme, it was almost like 2 weeks or so ago that some false hope was given to the family when he said that he was reviewing it. They then weren't part of that. They weren't going to be kept behind bars, and now they've made the U-turn. It was inevitable that this was going to be made. You had 900,000 people signing a petition to stop this. You could feel the public fury, and Andy Burnham, he's bought himself a little bit of time. They haven't got the detail of this worked out yet, but he's told his Justice Secretary, he's told his officials, you've just got to make this work.
Yeah. It's never dull, is it, Ryan? I mean, it's like we talk about this stuff often, and it often is repetitive. It's often similar stories that get churned around the news agenda, but man, it's never dull. Listen, Ryan, thank you for your time as ever. Ryan Sabey is Deputy Political Editor over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. Lines are open on that. Paul in Southend said, I find it extraordinary that any serious politician thinks France are going to stand by while a British warship, I did mention this, didn't I, unloads hundreds of migrants that they've worked so hard to get rid of. It's a double-edged sword for France. I don't like to have any sympathy with France, but of course, while people are waiting to get on dinghies, they are crammed on the northern coasts of France. So they don't want the problem either, because it's attracting them to northern France. Parts of northern France are hellholes because of temporary camps and all sorts of things. And that goes on forever. It's not like you get rid of them and they're over in the UK, another lot come. So in many respects, France don't want the problem either, which makes it more mysterious that France don't do more to stop it, for God's sake. 20 to 9, no, 20 to 10 even. You're listening to Talk. Back with more from you, coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 2210. Simon in Wigan says, most of us feel that this mega-dinghy is such an affront to our national pride. The optics of these massive rubber boats just invading our shores is an utter humiliation to the UK. I don't believe we've lost control of our borders. I believe border security has been deliberately stood down. It's so sad to see this strange liberal ideology destroying our home, says Simon in Wigan. I think that's brilliantly put. Let's get a word from Sam Rushworth, Labour MP for Bishop Auckland. Sam, good morning to you. Great to talk. I mean, just give us a take on this, because I've been sort of slightly stereotyping things here by saying, look, the Tories royally messed this up. They did nothing about the boats. I don't think Labour have fared much better. I know Andy Burnham claims that something's working. I'm not sure if he could point to specifically what that is. But is there a sort of liberal thinking that underpins the problem here?
No, I don't think there is. I don't know anybody who's a serious mainstream politician who doesn't think that we need to stop the boats. Reasons. One, our national security, because we don't know who's coming in. We don't want to have people just rocking up on our shores, but also because a lot of the people on those boats are the victims of people smuggling, and we care about that as well. So everybody wants to stop the boats. And if you actually look at what the government's done over the last 2 years, there has been significant progress. There's been a 70% increase in raids, in immigration raids. 60% of boats of attempted crossings in the last year have been stopped. The numbers coming across up to this point this year is about half what it was at the same point last year. So there has been progress, but the idea that you can just stop this overnight would be about as ridiculous as somebody coming in saying, vote for me and there'll never be a crime again.
No, I get that. But there is, I mean, you mentioned about half the boats and all the rest of it. I mean, we can kind of play that game all day long. We can go back to, I don't know, 2023 or 2021 when the numbers were also down. That's not necessarily due to French playing their part or the government of the day implementing a policy. There are, by definition of this, the numbers coming into Europe as a continent do wildly differ from time to time.
You can look at the number, you can look at other numbers. You can look at the fact that 60 to 65% of attempted crossings have been stopped, or you can look at the fact that there's been a big increase in arrests of people smugglers under this Labour government. The National Crime Agency has been doing its work on that. So we can see that there is a genuine concerted effort and there's genuine progress. This boat that's just come across is really shocking and worrying. It's the biggest ever. But you know what? The second biggest ever was in July 2023, when 165 people came on a single boat. Now, who was in charge at the time? Well, Suella Braverman was the Home Secretary. Robert Jenrick was the Immigration Minister. Both of those are now Reform MPs. And Chris Philps was the Crime and Policing Minister at that point. And these are three people who've taken to the media in recent days, making out like there's some magic wand that you can wave at these problems and they just go away. If it were that simple, why did they do nothing when the Reform and Conservative MPs were running our country and were overseeing this crisis at its absolute height?
But they were kicked out. They were kicked out at the election, weren't they? The Tories were. So.
And two of them have now joined the Reform Party, and they're pretending to be the solution to a problem that they helped create and that they certainly did nothing about. And they're making out as though there's some easy solution to this. Well, if there is, they would have done it and they wouldn't have lost the election.
Didn't they argue, though, Sam? Sorry to interject, but I'm certainly not here to defend Mr. Jenrick or Suella Braverman. But didn't Robert Jenrick resigned as Immigration Minister because he felt the policy that should be in place wasn't in place? And Suella Braverman, as you remember, wrote a fairly lengthy resignation letter highlighting the ineptitude of what she saw as the current government policy, that it wasn't fit for purpose. So they could argue back to you and say, yeah, you're right, it wasn't right, but it wasn't in my name. I legged it because of the very reasons you're raising, Sam.
I mean, she was the Home Secretary, so she was in charge of the policy. I think their resignation letters had a lot more to do with the internal wranglings of Conservative Party politics and who was looking for new jobs.
Well, maybe that was the case. What both parties seem to share here is this. This is where my problem is, Sam. If I said to you, look, 230 migrants, mostly men. There were some, I think there were 20 kids on this particular journey, which is, perilous enough. And so, it compounds the horror or the potential horror when children are on board. If I said to you 230 migrants, how many of those mean us harm, particularly to women?
Well, of course, we don't know the answer to that. And as I said at the beginning,
and that's it, isn't it? That is the answer. That's the problem. You've just answered the problem right there. We don't know the answer, and yet we still let these people in.
I mean, and I said at the very beginning, this is a problem. I think we also do need to make sure, though, that as politicians, that we calm some of the rhetoric and fear around this. I mean, if you actually look at crime statistics, it's simply not the case to say that all of these people are a threat.
No, I agree, but you just answered it yourself. We don't know which ones are a threat, Sam, and there's the problem.
We don't know who these people are, and a lot of them are coming from conflict zones, and that's what no one's pretending this isn't a problem. And the government has made big strides in dealing with it. This is obviously a big setback, and what we need to do is sort of double down and make sure that we work even harder and that we resource even better those measures that are appearing to have success.
But the bit that I can never get my head around, I'm just sorry to sound like I'm repeating myself here, and I apply exactly this to the Conservatives as well. We don't know, which I absolutely believe, even if you take an ardent right-winger, on a good day they will say, yeah, of that 230, I'm pretty sure 225 wouldn't harm anyone. That's not what they're here for. We can argue why they're here, but they're not here for that. But 5 might. So we're playing Russian roulette. And when those people arrive, if you did this at Gatwick Airport, if you jumped over the border at Gatwick Airport, you'd be in a prison cell for the remainder of your time before you're booted out the country. But if you do it on a boat, you are processed very lightly at Dover and then placed into a hotel. We don't know who you are, where you came from. I mean, come on. We can all see that is not just wrong, but it's dangerously wrong, Sam.
So biometric information is taken from those...
To a degree.
So I'll give you an example. One of the people that we sent back to France through the one-in, one-out deal tried to come back here. Because we had the biometric data, he was detained for 5 months and then sent immediately back. So we do take the biometric data from people to know who they are. But do you know what? One of the things that would have really helped with policing this is if we were still in Eurodac. So when we were in the European Union, we were part of the EU-wide system where we could take that biometric data and we could see the police records in other countries where those people had been. We could see what stories they told the authorities then and compare them to what they're telling us now. And that was better for our national security. Boris Johnson, in his botched Brexit deal, chose to leave Eurodac and basically left us defenceless in that regard. Now, I would like to see Andy Burnham do all that he can to persuade our European allies to allow us back into that intelligence sharing system, because that is one of the single best tools that we could have to tackle this crisis, and we chose to leave it.
You just mentioned, somebody just mentioned this to me, that the previous biggest boat had 165 people in it, on it. That was 2 weeks ago.
I believe it was in July 23, there was a boat with 165.
OK, so there's been 265 boats then.
Yeah, I mean, look that up. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that.
OK, well, there may be some debate. Maybe this isn't the point to debate specifically that. But when you said it, I thought, I'm sure there was one 2 weeks ago with that. So perhaps there'd been a previous 165er, or whatever the nautical term is. Briefly, Sam, while you're with us, Prime Minister Andy Burnham saying he's increasingly confident that work to increase prison space in the system will allow us to reduce the number of people released early. We now know that release about an hour ago that the killers of Andrew Harper will not be released. Your response?
Yeah, I certainly hope that that's the case. I mean, look, you always need to have a certain amount of early release, because that's how you get good behaviour in prison. And if people don't like that, then we need longer sentences and still need to have an earlier release from the longer sentence. But obviously, nobody wants to see people released with only a third of their sentence served. I feel this really personally, actually, because I've got a constituent who was just very badly beaten up by a man who was released out of prison after only 8 weeks and who was clearly a danger to society. I've got many constituents in those sorts of situations, but yet again, it's another area of government that was completely broken. To think that the previous government closed so many prisons, failed to build the prison spaces, and left them at this point where police were saying we can't arrest anyone because we've got nowhere to put them, and then they call a general election and run away. It's so important that we build the prison spaces that we need as quickly as possible.
Are we building them, though? Because I mean, I keep wondering about this. Nobody ever seems to see an image of a partly built prison.
Yeah, so 3,000 spaces have been built. We need to build more. Obviously, I've got a prison in my constituency where there are more places that are being built at the prison. So in empty ground, there are actually new buildings that are going to be erected there. And yeah, this is a national scandal and yet another part of government that the Conservatives broke.
Well, they say they increased prison places by 14,000.
They didn't. I mean, that's not true. The stats don't show that at all.
Is that up there with the 165 people in a boat 2 years ago story?
Well, I mean, they just didn't. They closed prisons. They didn't do enough. They left prisons at 99.999% full. I think that's widely known.
Well, whether it's widely known for the Tories, and again, I give no credit to the Conservatives for the heady levels of ineptitude that they seem to achieve and even exceed sometimes in so many areas. But, of course, now it's under your watch, isn't it? I mean, this is now a Labour Party story. Everything that happens now, you've been there over 2 years, you've got a new Prime Minister. Do you sense there's a general election coming up, Sam, anytime? What's the intel? Come on, you're a good bloke. I know you're a lefty, but you're a good bloke despite that. And there's you know, we're hearing, you know, there could be an election. What's the intel? Give us the lowdown.
I'm afraid I have no idea if there is an election coming up or not. I think it's quite frustrating, actually, that Andy became Prime Minister right at the start of parliamentary recess, so we've not even really been around each other for me to even pick up any intel.
Right. Well, do let us know as soon as you know if that's a deal we can strike here this morning.
I think I will probably know about the same time you do. That's life as a backbench MP, I'm afraid.
We'll give it a go. Sam, thank you. Sam Rushworth, Labour MP for Bishop Auckland, with us on the programme with his assessment of why Labour are doing quite well on the immigration thing. It's really interesting. When he said that there was the previous big boat had 165 migrants. You know, when somebody says something, you think, I don't remember that, but I do remember it a couple of weeks ago. And you think, well, look, I won't shout too loudly yet because maybe there's something I've missed. But I think I don't remember that. So only one person knows why I'm now laughing. I'm grateful to my colleague, Kevin O'Sullivan, who very quickly sent me a text saying, 165 people. That was 2 Fridays ago. And I thought, yes, it was, because we talked about it, didn't we? We talked about it at the time. I thought, well, maybe Sam Rushworth is referring to a previous 165er. But we can't find any evidence of this 165 2 years ago. So I don't know whether Sam had Googled something and found 2 weeks ago there was 100... and misread it for 2 years ago. I don't know. I'm just trying to guess. But Kevin did rather helpfully confirm exactly what I was thinking at that moment, that, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. I can't read you Kev's last text and his assessment on our last guest. It's killed me. It's probably what a lot of you are thinking. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Sex spaces on biological sex.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot have people going into a women's space, which is for women only, who is not a biological woman.
I was wondering whether that interview was conducted on April Fool's Day, because I think it was a new low in the sort of...
A new low for low?
A new low for low, because, I mean, just the absurdity of not being able to ask a very basic question about the monarch of our country.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. Welcome back, the home of common sense. Lots coming up, including Julie Hartley-Brewer after the news at 10 o'clock. Good morning.
Hola. I mean, since we've got, Costa del Sol weather, may as well,
Yeah, it's all right, isn't it?
That's about all my Spanish, to be fair. Dos cerveza. That's about it. That's about it. But anyway, I mean, I don't know, why wouldn't you come here on a I don't know, a boat or a plane or, I don't know, a mega-dinghy or not, but enjoy the weather? That seems to be what everyone's doing
Something
these
nobody
days.
ever really gives, I mean, maybe a little bit of, not credit, but a bit of understanding.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Calais?
I mean, to be fair,
I mean, the only thing you want to do when you go there, you want to leave.
Stock up on some booze.
Yep.
And then head on over. I mean, that mega dinghy. When you see, we were talking about it on the show yesterday. It broke in the morning.
Yep.
And then when you see the pictures, the fact that it's longer than a 737. So when you go on holiday, you're on a jet that is smaller than that dinghy. It's longer than a train carriage. It's longer than a double-decker bus. It carries more people than like the crew of a naval vessel. I mean, this is insane.
The statement from the Royal Navy was